Good evening. I'd like to call this work session of the Board of Trustees for the Spring Independent School District is officially called to order on Thursday, August 4th, 2022, and the time is now 6:05 p.m. Board of Trustees present are Trustee Adams, Trustee Carrera, Trustee Hodges, Trustee Durant, Trustee Jensen, Trustee Newhouse, and Trustee McDaniel. I'd like to ask everyone to please turn off or silence their cell phones or any electronic devices. As this time, I'd like to begin our meeting by reading the Spring ISD Equity Statement. Spring Independent School District strongly believes in educational and racial equity as fundamental aspects of its core mission and purpose, embodied through any program, practice, decision, or action that affects all students, with a strategic focus on those choices and policies that most strongly impact marginalized students. We believe all students, regardless of their ability, cognitive, physical, or social or emotionally, ethnicity, language, race, religion, gender, identity, and status, should have equitable access to opportunities, resources, support systems, and educational rigor in order to maximize their academic success and social and emotional well-being. We believe that every Spring Independent School District student is valuable and possesses individual strengths and characteristics that make our district a great place to learn and grow. Moreover, we seek to act and that believe instituting policies and practices that value diversity, committing ourselves as a district to continued growth and development, and working to support the success of every student in all that we do. Tonight, I'd like to ask the board if they have any, the next order of business are our minutes. So do any trustees have any changes, corrections, or recommendations for the minutes from June 9th, the work session from June 14th, our regular meeting that was on June 25th, the special called session we had on June 25th that morning, the special called session that afternoon, or the July 25th special called session? Any recommendations or changes to the minutes? Dr. Jensen?
I don't have a change, but I was listed as absent on June 9th. I want everybody to know I had COVID, and I was one of the observers of the meeting. And I can tell you that it was a good experience for me because I so much wanted to participate. And I'm wondering if in the future we can look at ways for people to come in on the chat or something like that to participate. The other thing is I just love these minutes that we do. They're in such detail now. And we have a list of people in new positions, but these aren't people that are new to us, and they're very valued. And I noticed on page 30 that it was good to review that for me again. Another thing is when I got to the points of pride, it is amazing to me every time I see what our kids do at a state and national level. And we had the points of pride where these 7 students from Spring High School were in the Thespian Festival and had placed and were going to international. So also that we were for the 9th consecutive year named a best community for music education. I think you need to remember that point as we listen to the bond committee present their proposed projects to be funded. And of course, the Spring ISD Transportation Department, they won an award I didn't even know was out there, and it was very, very wonderful. So I just wanted to point out a few highlights that as I was reviewing the minutes I saw. Does anybody else want to speak to minutes?
Thank you, Dr. Jensen. And before we move on, we do have an item on tonight's agenda that I would like to recommend that we table. And that is item. Excuse me, because we have a change in the agenda. Which one is it? Thank you. Item 5.1 on tonight's agenda is the presentation from the Bond Committee, Steering Committee. We will be tabling and moving that item until Tuesday night. And the Bond Committee representatives will be here to present that to the board. We're excited about hearing from them. And that will take place at our board meeting on Tuesday night. So if there aren't any objections from my colleagues.
Just procedurally, do we need a motion in a second to table?
At the table, an item on the agenda. No. Okay. Thank you. Our next item on tonight's agenda is our superintendent, Dr. Lapita Hinojosa, and I will turn it over to her at this time.
Thank you, President Durant. And I do want to start my comments, I think, with the continuation that Dr. Jensen just presented or pointed out that we did have at our June meeting, people that had been promoted into new positions. And we were very proud to be able to grow our own, from assistant principals to principals, or from principals to directors, and directors to assistant superintendents. And we had one person that was on the list that actually was not here. He was here during the day, but not for the meeting. And I know our board has already met him, but I wanted to officially welcome and introduce our new chief of academics. And this is his first board meeting with us. So Dr. Cuellar is saying, okay, it's my first one. So everybody be nice. No. But I'd like to introduce our chief of academics, Dr. Craig Cuellar. So welcome. Yes, you want to share, since he wasn't here in June, and our board always makes our new people share about themselves.
We just like to hear a little bit about you.
Hello, members of the board, and thank you again for thank you again for allowing me the opportunity to work in a stellar school system such as Spring ISD. Houston is home to me. I actually grew up here in Southwest Houston, a graduate from Alief ISD, and started my career in Alief and worked in Houston ISD for quite some time as an administrator. Initially from Brownsville, but I am making my way from West Texas most recently. I served as the deputy superintendent for Midland ISD, and glad to be back home and glad to be in your company and serve our incredible students on a great year that's ahead. So thank you again for the opportunity. I look forward to working with all of our students, serving our students, and ensuring that they all have the absolute best learning experiences, services, supports, and resources in the classrooms that any district has to offer. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cuellar, and welcome. And so I know we'll have lots more comments on Tuesday, but I do know we have some of our community members online, and just with this board meeting, we are officially kicking off our 2022-2023 school year. It seems like, I know, yay, but it seems like we were just here yesterday, right? Closing the year. So it's about ready to start. We did, as you all recall, graduate over 2,000 seniors just a couple of months ago. And we are getting ready for our summer graduations that are coming right around the corner from our students that participated in the Summer Bridge program. And we'll be hearing a little bit more about that this evening, but we'll be getting ready for our summer graduation. Also, I think we talked about it and we approved it in June, but just to let everyone out there know, our new high school is opening this school year. Momentum High School, our academy for students that
want a much smaller setting, maybe students that for one reason or another have gotten disengaged, coming to a small setting as a way for them to get re-engaged and working towards the diploma. It's also a place where students that may want to get ahead come. And so for all of our community members that are here and those that are watching us online, please know that registration is open for all of our students, and Momentum Academy will be taking middle and high school students. So sign up, go to our website, come visit the campus. It's right behind Westfield High School. I also want to, celebrate. We are focusing on making sure that we are engaging and we're reconnecting with our community, but most importantly, with the 5,200 employees here in Spring ISD. So we're bringing back convocation. And that'll be a week from today, August the 11th. And we are very grateful, appreciative of our partner here in our district, Fallbrook Church. And so we don't have a space here in the district to host an event such as this. So we'll be going to Fallbrook Church. We'll have half of our employees with us at 8:30 in the morning, and then the other half coming in after lunch. But it'll be a time for us to reconnect, launch our strategic plan that we've been working on, focused on the board's 6 priorities, and we'll be able to kick off an exciting new year. And so I'll save the other comments for Tuesday. I know we have a lot to talk about, but just excited to bring everyone back. Our teachers have been hard at work. I'll tell you, we had over 422 new teachers to Spring that just finished their summer institute today. And they actually spent the afternoon at their campuses, now getting their orientation from their campus leaders. But we had over 422. We've never hired that many ready for day one. So just excited, and want to thank all of our principals for their recruitment, our HR department for all that they've done to recruit and process our teachers, and of course, our department, our workforce development department that have been working hard to train them. So ready to kick off a new year, Ms. Durant.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hinojosa. Our next item is agenda participation. This item allows members of the public an opportunity to speak on any items listed on tonight's agenda. Dr. Hill, do we have anyone registered to speak under agenda participation?
No, Madam President, we do not.
Thank you. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our Chief Financial Officer, Ann Westbrooks.
Good evening, President Durant. The next item, are you referring to the bond election item
We are taking.
that we're,
The one that I tabled?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Westbrooks. We'll hear from you on Tuesday. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our Chief Academics, Dr. Collier. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
It's Cuellar.
Cuellar.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. One of my challenges, his name is Cuellar. Thank you.
All right. Can you present? Is there a way? Yeah, we're
Gonna bring
looking
us
to
tonight our
present.
summer bridge
All
information.
right.
Mhm.
Appreciate your help. Okay. Okay, members of the board and superintendent, we are excited to share an update on our summer bridge. Sorry. There we go. On our summer bridge update, we want to provide a quick overview and recap of the program, and then really dive into how our students ultimately performed. I do want to start off by saying that I am joined by Dr. Parasau, who's also going to help facilitate the conversation. And if there's any other additional comments, we do have some Dynamite team members in the audience that are also here to be engaged in the conversation. So just to recap really quick, our targeted 3 focus areas for our summer bridge was specifically addressing specific content through acceleration and intervention, and being very intentional and purposeful on focusing on our high yield TEKS and standards to ensure that we were bridging very specific level gaps, and concentrating on our 3 core focuses, which was literacy, mathematics, and science. The 5 overarching goals that we have set for ourselves for our summer bridge was to achieve 70% mastery of our summer bridge reading TEKS pre-K-8 across all 3 core content areas of reading, math, and science. We were also established an outcome of 100% of ensuring that we had 100% of our enrolled students gain credit recovery for their attempted courses. And also we set ourselves a 98% attendance outcome as well. So just a quick recap, because I do know that the board had a presentation in the beginning of summer in terms of the logistics of our summer bridge program, but we focused on 3 critical core areas of literacy, science, and mathematics, where we were dedicating over 100 minutes of instruction through each of those core areas. Our summer school structure was broken into grade band cluster sites. As you can see that we had 5 elementary sites that we utilized, 2 middle schools and 1 high school. But also important to note too, that even though our summer bridge program focuses on learning acceleration and intervention, that we also offered multiple opportunities for other students as well. We also had gifted and talented camps, emerging bilingual camps, and we also offered 21st century for our students as well through our program. Just a real quick fact sheet. Through this, we show that we had close to about 6,142 students. We had close to about 350 instructional staff that participated through our summer bridge program. And here for our transportation routes, we are showing that we had about 70 drivers, 21 attendants, but also close to around 70 total routes that were in service to all of our students throughout the summer months.
Dr. Cuellar is allowed to ask questions at this point?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I did some quick math on that last slide
Yes, ma'am.
because it looked like it was very different, the student to teacher ratios at the different grade levels. And I noticed it ranged from over 30 students per teacher in the middle grades to about 14 and a half students, which are obviously 14 or 15 students per teacher in the pre-kinder. And later on, I think we see that the pre-kinder actually is one that reached their goal. Was there a reason why you had such different student to teacher ratios at those grades?
Yes, and so we're always looking at that economical feasibility as well as as you move up in the grade levels. For high school specifically, we see more of that work is computer-based as they're working on credit recovery. And so for those classes, they can be larger sizes in that computer lab while the teacher is moving around the classroom working with students one-on-one. So as you move up, the class sizes did change based on the grade level band.
We're going to go through each of the 3 content areas. We talked briefly about that. We were setting a very ambitious goal of achieving 70% mastery on the very specific high yielding TEKS. And here we are showing the percentage of TEKS mastered by each of our student groups. Kindergarten, 64, grades 1 through 2, a total of 47.5, 3 through 5, almost 50%. grade 6 through 8 at 41, and total district around 46%. I do want to start off by saying that even though if we tend to focus on the goal column of not being met, it's also a celebratory moment too, to celebrate the amount of growth too that our students have also shown. What's also good about this as well is that our teachers at the start of school are going to have robust data and are going to have very, very specific, detailed information in terms of where their students are coming into their class and program. So we will be able to target specifically some of the standards that might not necessarily been met during summer months.
Will we be doing any assessing on what we could have done different? What were some of our findings and what our expectations are in addressing those?
Yes, ma'am. One of the exciting things too that we're also going to be looking forward to is engaging in our beginning of the year assessment through our MAP assessment. One of the data points that our MAP BOI will be able to tell is actually the total picture of our students, and really looking at pulling out our summer student group and really looking at the totality of the effect that our Summer Bridge program has had on our students. And we are looking forward to presenting that to the board at a later date.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question. You mentioned growth. And so since here, these are percentages of mastery and the goals met, how are we measuring growth?
Yes, ma'am. These are when we are capturing student groups, actually looking at basically the standard itself in terms of students that has shown success in that standard. What we are going to do, what we're going to continue to do, is pull apart the data and actually look at it student by student to be able to see. What we're seeing here already, for example, with kindergarten for our math TEKS, is 68% of our kindergartners have, or 68% of those specific TEKS and standards have been met. But what we are going to be able to provide the board at a later time is more granular data in terms of what this looks like by the standard and also by the student and also by the level and group.
Okay. So we'll be looking at that later.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So this isn't 68% of the kids mastered the kindergarten TEKS. Is that what this is?
That's correct. So the researcher and accountability testing team did do the data pool, so I can speak to that piece. As far as and they're each week 2, 3, and 4 each had an assessment, and those assessments were tied to the high yield standards that students were testing, also tied directly to the curriculum, which was Amplify, Eureka, Carnegie. And so we were pulling those questions from those assessments, as well as some that were in, when you got to the middle school level, they were also in 3rd grade, they were tied to former STAR release test questions. So what this data pool did was it looked at that final week assessment, which was summative. It covered all of the content that was covered during Summer Bridge and those high yield standards. And then it weighed those questions to see, did they master that specific TEK and that specific concept? So what we've done here, we will have another report that we will share with you in the board update that will actually give you grade by grade and content by content breakdown of each standard. However, for here, we showed holistically, since our goal was tied to 70% mastery of the standards, that's what each of these slides will represent, is how we perform based on that cumulative goal that was set for Summer Bridge and presented to the board.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that I understand what you're saying. So when you say goal, 70% mastery of Summer Bridge math TEKS, that could be kind of read 2 ways. It could be 70% of the kids mastered the TEKS, or it could be that the kids as a whole mastered 70% of the TEKS. So I'm confused about which one it is.
So looking at the Summer Bridge math TEKS, 68.1% of the students mastered the TEKS for Summer Bridge math that were covered during the summer.
Okay.
In the curriculum that was outlined. So not like all of the content for math for grade level, but where that focus, because the scope and sequence for summer school was built around those high yield standards, specifically where students were struggling. And so I know that's one thing that Dr. Quayler spoke to earlier, is that even that the goal was these goals were very lofty. And that when you look at that, we have students who perform very low on these standards before. Now coming into summer school, there's been a lot of intervention that has happened in acceleration to be able to bring them to that point. And the great thing is it won't stop there, that data also is in Eduphoria. So while the teachers in summer school had access to see how students were progressing, so will the teachers in the new year. And they'll be able to see right away, where can I work with these students?
So that kind of leads into what I was curious about, because you said that there was growth, even though you're not showing us the percentage of growth of what took place, where they were and how much they grew. You did mention that these students, each one of their fall teachers will get a printout of that student, the faults and the things that they did master, that they will have at the beginning of the year. And is that going to happen?
And it won't be a printout. So what we utilize is a live database through Eduphoria. And what the great thing about that is that, where classes change. So students may move from this class to that class, that when every day when that teacher goes in, it shows the students that are assigned to them. And it shows their entire academic and testing history with us all the way back. So they're able to actually go and see the live data, and they can even go in by standards and drill down to even the demographic subpopulation groups, and look at to say, hey, I want to see how my female students did on this specific math standard. And so they're able to break it down to that level as they build their intervention groups.
That's kind of, I guess, what I'm looking, not necessarily a printed paper copy, but teacher A says Johnny had 50%. He mastered only 20% in addition, and he mastered 75% in subtraction, and he mastered 10% in multiplication, to be able to break it down to, they know the weaknesses of that student and where they need to work on their strengths. Will they get that?
Yes,
information? It
and-
sounds like they will be able to get into the computer to see that.
Yes, and even better, because the assessments were delivered through Eduphoria, they're actually able to see the misconception analysis, to see the question themselves and which answer choices the student chose. So as they're providing that acceleration, they can see, help identify where the gap is for that child.
Good.
And to confirm, all teachers on day one will have access to that data and those resources.
I hope we're taking some of this with a grain of salt, because I know that in high school and middle school, there are kids who sometimes don't want to take a test and will randomly pick answers. So I hope the teachers are all aware of that.
And Dr. Cuellar spoke to this earlier about later. We will have some deeper data for you. Historically, in spring, we've utilized MAP as our measure. We look at end of year, our end of year map, and then we will compare it to the beginning of year, and we'll be able to look at how those students performed and grew over the course of the summer.
So you mentioned teachers can go into Eduphoria and look at all that data. What about families? How are we communicating how students did for Summer Bridge to families?
So, Dr. Cuellar, did you want to speak to that piece?
Sure. I mean, I think that a lot of the communication to our families as well is working also with our schools to be able to help provide that information. Also centrally here as well, especially when we get to and we start to talk about credit recovery, especially at our high schools. Those that communication strand to families is ongoing, especially when you're talking about credits and students that are going to be enrolling in their fall courses. But those conversations are happening with schools and with principals, and ensuring that they're receiving that information.
Is that communications plan in writing? And is it like a template for each? So everyone
So-
Doing the same thing, that we're all doing the same thing.
So every year after we give our beginning of year assessment for MAP and for Circle, that is part of the communication with our schools, that information is communicated out to parents. So they will be provided that update, showing where students are, which as they were at the end of the year when we did our end of year assessment. So they'll have that connection to see, okay, I knew this is where my child was before when school ended and before summer school. Now I can see, this correlation for that growth and where they are in that grade level.
My question is, everyone is aware of what that process looks like across the board? Okay.
Yes, and we actually send out notification. Not only do our assistant soups support that work to ensure that it's completed by our campuses, we also send out communication through our SISD Now to all staff regarding the process and reminding them of the timelines.
So just to jump back, I think that's something we can consider maybe for next year when we get to the end of our summer bridge, just to show families, here's the growth that the students made. Here are, just like Eduphoria has those reports, how can we break that down to make it simplistic for families to understand what the strengths are of students and what needs there are, how they can support them at home. So just something, because we know the teachers are going to look at it when we get in, but do families know what they can do at home to continue that support?
Yes, and I'm sorry for not being clear on that. The MAP report that's sent home is actually a parent report. So Circle and MAP both have a parent report that is sent home, and it explains what each of those education needs. What does this mean? What can I do with my child? And we also have that parent assessment handbook that we shared with you last year that is also shared with parents, that gives more details, even videos that breaks down the reports and gives suggestions for parents as they're working with their kids and partnering with our schools.
So they'll get that after summer bridge, or is that BOY?
That is BOY. So when students come back, that's part of the first month back in school.
Right.
They take that beginning of year assessment, and what that will do is it will help show all of those skills, so that as we're working, because summer school focused on specific TEKS and standards, as we're partnering with parents, we want to show the full picture of where they are and where we can work.
So that's what I'm getting at, is since those are such high yield TEKS, those can be the things that we share with families to say, hey, here's your child has been with us for the summer. Here's how they did. Here's what the TEKS that we need to continue focusing on. We know it's going to continue throughout the school year, but just so that they're informed and they know, and it's not just, I know I sent my child to summer school, but I don't know what the benefit was of that.
What I'm hearing, Trustee McDaniel, is we do understand that we have a plethora of those opportunities for those reports, like Dr. Parasol just said, but it's what's happening before the BOY. How are we communicating with families on the immediate?
Exactly.
In terms of once summer bridge concludes, what is the immediate response to how we're
Right.
communicating out to our families and our
Mhm.
students as we enter the school year? It's noted.
Exactly, because if you're a parent at home and you're preparing your child and you're working with them on a regular basis, you want to know where they still have opportunities from summer bridge to make sure that they're up to where they need to be for that BOY, so they can start off. So are we communicating that? And then how do we know that communication is truly getting in the parents' hand?
Just to piggyback on that, because our BOY data is not going to come until probably October, September, right? So that's July to October, when I could have been doing things at home and supporting my child and knowing what to target. So that's what I mean, just to have that continuous communication with the families.
And I don't know if I missed it, but how does that communication get sent out or could get sent out?
Yeah, so I think one way that it could be sent out is through the teacher, right? Having a phone call and or a conference to make sure that this is happening. But I think that's an area that we can definitely continue to expand, because the more that we communicate with parents, I had one of my boys attended summer school. And so I think the more that we can attend and communicate with parents' progress, the more savvy our consumers, which in this case are our parents, can be. Therefore, they can help the kids, right? So we want to equip the parents with all of the tools to get them ready to make sure that they are able to help their child be successful, right? parents are the first educators, and then we should be there to make sure that they have all of the tools and all the information that they need. So I've got a lot of different notes and different pieces for that. So thank you for that.
I
Yes,
will
sir.
say that, so my son was participating in Summer Bridge. And I realized he wasn't making the progress he needed to be making because I was getting those emails. And so I was able to get on that early and work with him through pretty much the entire summer, which will bring me to raise a question later on about some of the things I observed. But that piece of communication does happen and happened effectively, I think.
Thank you. And just to reiterate, we're going to make sure at all levels that it's summer programming, summer ongoing communication is happening. I know very specific for emergent bilingual programs. Those reports are sent out, weekly reports, and then the end of the summer program. At the beginning of the year, and I know like Mr. Adams, Ms. Correa, you receive your resource parent guide. We do trainings through family and community engagement in partnership with the testing department on helping parents read those reports so that they understand what did my EOY, the end of year, mean, and now what does the beginning of the year mean? And then they go through and help the parents understand the work that they can be doing at home to help their children, accelerate. For us, it's very tight at the beginning of the year, very tight. Communication is sent out to the schools. We give the school principals deadlines to send those out. We go back and send mass communication. But I think what I hear in the discussion is we've got to be just as tight for summer school. And so I know when we're doing credit recovery, we do really tight communication to the parents because it's such a short period of time and they got to get it in there. As we're just doing either acceleration or an intervention, it might not be as tight as the high stakes of high school. So I hear that happening. I see everyone even in the back taking note that we need to be able to be just as tight as we are in the beginning of the year, and the training that we provide the parents, the communication, that we do that in the summer also. Thank you.
And I did want to piggyback off of Ms. Debbie's comment earlier about the student to teacher ratio. I was kind of sitting here mulling over what she was saying. And while I understand the argument of financial feasibility, I don't want us to get caught in this thought process of, well, our kids are older, so they can be more self-guided because they've got a laptop, they have their lesson plans. And so I'm thinking, we're all trying to figure out why our failing rates seem to increase as we get from elementary to middle school to high school. So I would propose that we go back and really try to relook at those student to teacher ratios just from a different lens to make sure that we're not looking at it from one perspective and assuming that the kids are going to be okay because they're older, and maybe that's the piece that we're missing. So just wanted to put that out there.
Also, that previous slide about science, the only group that reached the goal was kindergarten. And I guess we're learning science in the upper grades there with computer programs, which I'm going to tell you is not a great way for people who are already having trouble in science to learn science. So.
I know, Mr. Adams, you mentioned the high school. So we did have a data update on that as well. So of those 1,766 students that were enrolled in summer school, there was an actual attempt of 1,846 courses, and 1,796 courses were completed credits that would have not been gathered any other way. We're going to see some of those students at summer graduation that Dr. Hinojosa mentioned earlier, and summer school provided that opportunity. So so while we did not reach the 100% goal, we did have 97.29%. One of the strong motivators that we started last year is that once students complete the required coursework, then they are able to enjoy the rest of their summer. And so that motivating factor has greatly increased our students' motivation to get complete.
This is fantastic. Do we know what percentage that 1,846 represents for all students that needed recovery? Is that 10%, 50%?
We can find out.
That is a data report that we can pull for you, yes, as far as how many were offered the opportunity to summer school and how many actually attended. Yes, we can get that for you.
I'm really trying to assess, did our summer program touch the majority of students that needed, recovery? Yeah, 1,800.
I think there is, was that our final slide?
So
I'm just curious what that 1,800 represents.
we'll provide that
Thank you.
data for you.
Thank you.
Our last slide it talks about the attendance across each of our levels. Here, of course, we set the ambitious goal of 98%, but here, as a district overall, we did get to 94, but we, all things considered, when we're looking at across about 6,000 students, we had still a very high attendance rate for our summer program. And that concludes our summer bridge update.
Actually, so as I said, my son participated in the summer bridge. He needed to work on his algebra. And early on, his teacher reached out to me and said that he wasn't making sufficient progress to meet his goal. And so me and his mother immediately got on him, which meant that I pretty much did along with him the entire algebra course, the high stakes TEKS that we were looking at. And I will say, I thought the program was excellent. The instruction was phenomenal, but it was somewhat limited in its scope in terms of modality. So for me as a learner, this was great. For my son, it was horrible. It absolutely did not fit the bill for him in terms of the way the instruction was provided. I also saw sort of a distressing lack of diversity in terms of the instructors in the course. So that's just something that when we talk to the vendor about how they are providing that, they need to address the issue of different learning modalities. I can't imagine what any kid with special needs did with that course. I don't see how they did it at all. And really the only way my son got through it was me writing, and there's a lot of tears in my house sometimes because it was like for him mind-numbingly boring, like to the point where he would have rather been punished than sit. I made him sit in the living room and do it, and it wasn't for him. But again, I thought the instruction was really good for a certain type of learner, but it wasn't for everybody, so we need to address that.
For our next item, I'd like to represent our Chief of Police, Ken Copeland.
Thank you, Trustee Durant. Give me a moment. Let me see if I can share my screen and. Right, got it.
There you go.
So I share my screen here so I will be able to present my presentation. All right, so I want to give you all a quick update. I'm trying to be as concise as possible without giving a lot of our security details out, but definitely touching safety as much as possible. And so I want to kind of review some things we've done since the end of school last year and over the summer, just to kind of give you a landscape of what we've done to make sure that our campuses are safe and our students have the ability to come learn in a secure environment. So if you remember, last year when we finished up, we talked about having a collaborative team, and that collaborative team was composed of campus liaisons, operations, and police team. And we sat before the end of school last year, and we worked on a hazards mitigation plan, and we went through several processes in order to determine what was necessary. And so we attacked our infrastructure, we talked about our systems, and then our staffing on each one of our each one of our buildings to make sure that we were going through the process correctly. And so state of Texas asked us to do this, and so I gave you a quick example of a few things that I pulled out. If we went through the 5 phases of emergency management as we continue to plan, I think I presented the same process to you as we were building our COVID process, how we're going to recover, come back to school, and we use the same exact plan. And again, I just pulled a few things out. So in prevention, we made sure that we were secure in our perimeters. We checked our exterior campus doors to make sure that's done, and I'll talk on that in a moment. We started training our staff last year and over the summer to make sure that everybody understands our protocols, understands how to respond to violence on campuses, as well as some of the other tasks that we have to manage. We also put together some work groups, and that's worked very well. To speak of, you've heard me talk about a reunification group. We're starting to work with those teams. So in preparation to mitigate any confusion, to make sure we don't lose children, that we reunite them with their parents as fast as possible. So we started that work group already, and that's moving forward. In that preparation, we mentioned some of the training, standard response protocol, that's been pushed on our campus, and a few other items that I'll touch in a moment to all of our staff. And we have shooter detection systems on our campuses. They give us ability to, if there's a gun violence where the gun is shot on campus, that information is then triggers the building to go into lockdown. There's some automatic components that are put into the system that automatically locks the doors. There's an audible announcement that goes through the speaker system, both in English and Spanish, and giving instructions to everybody in the campus. It then sends information simultaneously to our real-time safety center. They can then see where the action is occurring, pull up the cameras and watch the trail to make sure as police are responding, they're sending them to the exact location so they don't have to wander the building. And then we have recovery. As part of our recovery is making sure that our partners that we have, our other public safety partners are in place. Today I had an opportunity to go to Constable Herman's. He has every year at the beginning of the school is a lunch for all of the ISD chiefs. And so we sit down and we talk about what we have available and what gaps we need them to help fill, if any. And he's always a great partner for us. And so we went through that today, and we met some other chiefs. And so we extended that in our plans that we share with them, so they know the plans that we have in place and any of our details on our campuses. So we went through that, and that's part of this 5-phase emergency management that we were tasked with, as well as TEA also made some requirements to us over the summer on the 30th. And so this is part of that. And I just pulled a few things out for you all to note. And then, we also have launched a couple of new components over the past couple of years as it concerns to Raptor. Raptor technology, I know all of you are familiar with it. Predominantly, it's housed our visitor and volunteer management component that we've used a very, very long time in the district. And the nice thing about that, both sides of it allows us to screen the people that come on campus that have access to our kids. In addition to that, once they're in the building, it lets us track them that they're in the building or they've left the building, which is very important if we were to have a dynamic situation on the campus. So we have that. We have our emergency management module that we launched. I believe it was at the beginning of last year or for the first semester that we launched our emergency management model. The emergency management model I displayed to some of the folks at the SB 11 meeting. The nice thing about that is once we get it fully up to all of our campuses this coming up semester, teachers and staff will have the ability to make notification of a lockdown, anything in the SRP protocol, a shelter in place, or a hold. So they'll be able to pick their phone up, press a button. It'll automatically send notification to dispatch and the campus. It's geo-fenced. So it communicates to the campus what's going on. Again, our real-time safety center and dispatch, they have access to view the cameras and the notification codes to them as well. There's also features in that if we ever go to a lockdown or hold, there's a text feature, a silent text feature that they can text in that text group. anybody, everybody that's connected. So it's myself, my safety team, the campus administrators, they can text back and forth what they need or what they have in front of them. And it's live. It's just like your cell phone. As soon as you send the text, it deposits to the system and we respond right back. So that's a new feature we have. And that's the back end of that. And the largest component of that is our reunification piece that we're going to start training our staff on this summer. So it allows us, if we have to take children or students and staff from one campus to our reunification site, it electronically allows them to log their students and track them. So it's going to speed up our process. We're hoping for reunification, getting to their parents as soon as possible.
I have a question on
Yes, sir.
Raptor. So my understanding is, and so correct this misunderstanding if it's improper, is that one of the things that failed in Uvalde was components of the Raptor system. I'm a little bit nervous about anything that's sort of reliant on people's cell phones. I know my cell phone is connected to our bus tracking system, and that drops off all the time. And so I wonder if there is a backup system for Raptor, or if there's a secondary protocol that doesn't rely on that system if that system suffers some sort of failure.
It's a great question. So all of our systems we try to place a multi-layered approach to safety. And so we want to make sure that if one system fails, another system is on top of it. So I'm familiar with what you're referring to in Uvalde, and I believe part of the problem there was connectivity in the building. And that's one of the things we're going to be addressing or attempting to address in the bond is increasing that connectivity in the building. The next, if you talk about moving students from that, we're going to go back to old pen and paper. So they have to get their roll book, make sure they're checking the students out. We're going to take that document and that book to the scene. If it's simply notification that something's occurring, we have the phone systems that are in the building, and we have our police officers that are on campus, in addition to our real-time safety center that are monitoring those campuses. So those are just options that we have that are overlaid on it, trying to push the response ability down to the lowest level as easy as we can to make sure everybody feels comfortable reporting and receiving notification. But in a worst case scenario, we have a power outage. We're going to go back to old pen and paper and analog type work. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
That actually, I think you might have just answered my question. I was kind of piggyback off of what he was saying. You know, everything that we have is based on, you know, the geofencing and the cell phones. And so what is our contingency if we have the power go down because of a storm or something, you know, what is our backup plan for those kind of situations?
So we try to have in every one of our plans what we call a no comms plan, that the comms don't work. And so that is we would have to rely on somebody from the campus to report it, obviously. And so it's either by cell phone or device. And if a police officer on campus, it's going to be our radios. And so once that's done, then everything we pull out all the technology components that's normally part of the process, or we're accustomed to now, should I say, and we go back to old school knocking on doors and physically getting there. We also have some relay systems where our team, we use our cell phones, text messages, which we try not to use because we want everybody on their police radio, but that's still something we do on occasion to make sure we're communicating.
And then you mentioned that I guess it was kind of a round table with the other chiefs. Kind of how do we stack up? How do we measure to some of the other districts?
I'll tell you, and I've said this multiple times, I celebrate you all's leadership. You all put some things in place and y'all have made safety a priority in our district. And so some of the struggles that other colleagues have, I don't have. For a couple of reasons. One, your leadership, and then we have a dynamic group of committed professionals in our police department that I'll take anywhere. And so that in itself says a lot with the leadership y'all have and the commitment to safety and the people that are actually going to perform the job. We'll just have to wait and see, but I'd put my money anywhere.
I had a quick question. You said that we partner with the sheriff's department. Can you give us just a little snippet of what that partnership entails?
Sure.
Just to let the community kind of have an idea of where we are with that.
Sure. So the sheriff's office specifically, they have a community liaison that we work with frequently. She's on our safety and security committee, as a matter of fact. And so if we have anything in the community that we need to help address, remember towards the end of school last year, we had a problem with one of our apartment complexes. And so we partnered with her. We were out in the field, even in our community, helping out our communities that were in those apartment complexes needing services. So we share information. There may be occasion where we, as an example, when school opens, we're going to provide them our opening school plan, our safety, our traffic plan. I spoke to the captain today, and I asked him to make sure that over definitely the first few weeks of school, that he helps us saturate the traffic around our campus, just to make sure people are slowing down for our students as they're crossing the street, as parents are trying to pull in, that everyone is just aware and safety. They've committed to that. If I call in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, they're always available for us, always. Even to the point where if we have investigations that we're working here that are criminal investigations, we share information back and forth. They may be working something they need our intel for or our assistance, and we're frequently on the phone. Sometimes, unfortunately, sometimes more than we like to be with them.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And then lastly is that student safe module. I'm excited about this module. This is a solution that they are launching in the United States. They've used a model like this in the UK for some time. Soon as we launched SB 11, there was a responsibility for school district, the superintendent specifically, to have a threat assessment component. And so, Ms. Correa, speaking to you and Mr. Adams' point, everything was handwritten. And so there was a lot of checks and balance that our team, along with the school counselors team, we tried to make sure that we didn't lose a child in that process. Well, this solution allows us to go in and increase our contact with that student by assigning tasks to everybody on the team. And so it will allow a teacher to say, observe student A with this behavior that is threatening himself or others, harmful himself or others, and they took care of these certain steps. They provided them to whatever wraparound services. And by the way, principal so-and-so on this date, you need to meet with the student. Teacher so-and-so needs a follow-up on this date. Police chief, you need to follow up on this date. And it sends everybody notifications. And it has a Google, not a Google, but it has a spreadsheet, a calendar that allows the overseer, so everybody on the district team, to look at that student and make sure that we're all making our touch points with that student and we're not losing them in the process. So I'm really excited about that. I think that's really going to help our team and increase touch and accountability for our students. And then, last year we launched our anonymous reporting option for our students. We have seen towards the school, we launched in November. As the school progressed and we were closing school down last year, our students began to notice it more and began to use it more. Oftentimes it was really nice. Me and my team were celebrating that some of our calls were frivolous. And so we enjoyed those, right? I'd rather have those than the others, but they know it's there, and we're expecting that this school year it will increase even more. So that gives them opportunity just to receive it. The process is that information goes straight to the supervisor, that's the lieutenant that's over the school, myself, and then our real-time safety center and dispatch. They get it automatically. That team quickly triages where it needs to go, and they validate if it's a true complaint or a true threat, or if it's just a kid making an outcry that we need to push to a principal. And so oftentimes we're on the phone with the principal trying to create a plan for them as we're reading through the process. So and it's been very effective for us. And again, it's given our students a great voice. And as I mentioned in June 30th, TEA required us to to ensure that schools have a lot of processes in place before we open schools. This is a sample school. This is not one of our schools. But just to give you an example, that last year in April, we were already ahead of this. So last April, our team, operations team, and every single principal walked the campus together. And so what they did was they identified with the RS2 system what doors they were going to call a red door, a yellow door, and a green door. And so what that mean was, as we set some certain protocols up on our RS2 system based on that schematic that everybody agreed upon. It allows us to create, to secure our campus when we feel like it needs to be secured, and allow it to open up in times when we want to have our parents have more access to certain locations. But it really screens, and in the process of that, of doing that, we did additional follow-up on doors and processes. And then every single one of our campuses has this device located on the campuses, and this is our lockdown panic button. We've tested these every single one of our campuses this summer. I think the last one was just recently. We're 100% on functionality. We've tested and looked at all of our doors. Every one of our buildings, 100% of our doors and buildings have been examined. And if there's a measure that needs to be corrected, the work order is already placed. Gary and I had a conversation, Gary Hutton and I had a conversation just today about it. The work orders will be completed before the start of school if there's something that was identified prior to. So the RS2 system, which you all know about very well, that has been put in place, and we are able to, even our real-time safety center, look at doors and watch how often the alarms have gone off or if it's unfunctional. We also have bleed kits, bleeding control kits on all of our campuses. They relaunched them last year. This is another part of our safety plan. We have anticipations that if campuses require or request more this coming up year, we will definitely address that and figure out how we can create that solve that problem for them and decide where they need to go. They will also receive extra training on these devices as well this school year. Our CRAZE training that you all had an opportunity to receive last week, I believe it was. So far, I believe we've already trained around 1,100 employees. And so that was prior to school being open. We have a pretty aggressive plan working with Dr. Perez's team in order to make sure we get in front of the staff either right when school starts or a few weeks after, just because some of the staff members have been on vacation, really on vacation, and they're starting to roll back in town. So we're having the opportunity to grab them, not only for this module, which is about the avoid, deny, and defend, but also the bleed kits, the RS2 system, and let me see what else, in the RSP and the standard response protocol. We're going to make sure that everybody understands those processes before we go home. We're hoping October, trying to make sure we touch everybody by the time, and it's a pretty aggressive date, but we're definitely trying to push to that. And then coming to a close, I've had an opportunity, I guess I call it an opportunity, the past few weeks to answer questions to our parents, which is very uncomfortable to me, to be very honest with you and frank. And so some of the questions have been, will we go and will we take care of our kids? And that's heartbreaking for me. I've been doing this job for almost 30 years, and that's all I've ever done. All I've ever done is protect the public. So to get those questions, it's heartbreaking, even though I'm even getting emotional thinking about it. We are truly committed. Our department is truly committed to taking care of not only our children, but our staff, and not only our staff, but our community. And so I just want to give the community a really quick snapshot of who what I say have in the building. And so we have 77 full-time employees. That's their sole dedication is safety. We have police officers real time, our dispatch, that is their full-time job. And we run a 365, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week operation. So that's all they do. Inside our department, we have employees. You have employees in the police department that have worked on full-time SWAT teams, which means the work you see on television, they've done every single day for their career. So there is no expectation that they're going to do anything different than what they've done their entire career. We have federal and state task force experience. Those task forces are narcotics, human trafficking, internet crimes against children. And because of the nature of that work, they were going in and hunting some of the worst people in the world to put them in jail because they're harming the community. They're going to find them, arrest them, grab their evidence. So just the nature of that places them in some of the places that has a community worrying about if we're going to make the call or not. In addition to that, We have folks that have graduated from the FBI National Academy, LEMIT, which is the state of Texas's leading law enforcement management institute. And it leads, we're one of the few states that actually has a program like that. Flexi, which is the federal law enforcement facility in Georgia. And then we have almost 345 years of law enforcement, school-based law enforcement experience when you collectively put that together. So that we have groups of people that their entire career has been protecting kids. Entire career. In addition to the hostage rescue, so that same type of work. We have also several members of our department who've been in full combat in war. They have been in combat in that environment. So I am, again, mentioned earlier, I am honored to work with these group of men and women. I have no doubt that they're gonna do the right thing. On occasion, we're human, we will mess up because we're human, but that won't be for any other reason outside of us trying to do the right thing. And then again, I mentioned our real-time safety center that we have. We've also increased our inventory of our protective equipment. We've increased the number of rams we have, or excuse me, breaching tools that we have, crowbars, lock picking sets, sledgehammers, those type of devices we're increasing. We're also purchasing more shields for our police officers to have available. So we just had 2 come in a couple of days ago. And so we're continually exploring options with some vendors to get more in. So we're increasing our protective equipment for our staff and our students as well. And then lastly, we're working with our communications team. Let me see if this works. We're working with our communications team to make sure that as we move through our SRP model, so we want to make sure that our parents are also informed on how we're doing and what's going on campus. So we have the expectation that sometime in the near future, we're just trying to get all our videos cut and then work on a modality, how we can push it out, that it's consistent for us. But once the emails you all would get that says blank school is on a hold, or blank school is on a lock or on a shelter. Oftentimes we have even staffs, because if you haven't seen that often enough, you get confused on what's a hold and what's a lockdown. And so let me see if I can get this to play. We're going to embed devices like this in our communication to make sure that families understand exactly what SRP we're in. Let me start it over.
Hallways and remain in the room or area until the all clear is announced.
Let me start it over. I apologize. I thought this volume was up.
Hold. Students are trained to clear the hallways and remain in the room or area until the all clear is announced. Adults and staff are trained to close and lock the door, account for students and adults, do business as usual. Hold is the most common procedure used during a medical emergency, illness, or injury. During a hold, a parent can pick up their child, however, expect delays.
So that's an overview, but we're gonna pull each one of those out. And so every time we have just a hold, that piece will go out so everybody understand what that is and how parents, students, staff should act. So, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Our next item is a updated annual report from our School Health Advisory Council, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Hinojosa.
Thank you, Ms. Durant. And we are on page 94 is the board item, and then immediately behind it, we have a presentation. I'd like to invite Ms. Carroll up to the podium. And for our board, this is the annual report that we provide to the board on the School Health Advisory Council. And Ms. Carroll will give us, we did not do it in May and June. We normally see it in May. We had so many celebrations in May when we were out at BAML. And then in June, we really concentrated on our budget. So we've asked Ms. Carroll to present and give us an overview of what the committee accomplished this past year, and then also moving forward, what their plans are for the coming school year. Ms. Carroll is our Executive Director of Family and Community Engagement.
Okay, good evening, President Durant, members of the Board of Trustees, and Dr. Hinojosa. Thank you for giving me the opportunity tonight to come before you and present this annual report to the board. Before I get started, I do want to acknowledge Ms. Lori Carroll, who is our coordinator of PE. She is online tonight because she wasn't able to join us in person, but I definitely wanted to acknowledge her because she's been side by side with me as we did all of the work for the 21-22 school year. And so Lori, hello, I know you're online. So again, we're here tonight to talk about the things that we were able to accomplish with our School Health Advisory Council this past school year, 21-22. Just giving a quick reminder of the importance of SHAC. Our mission, what we are here to do each year, is to ensure that our students have healthy minds and bodies. And in alignment with our district mission, is so that they can display good character and are ready to learn, contribute, and lead in today's global society. And so as a SHAC, we do work with Spring ISD. Our SHAC is made up of community volunteers, and they work with our district and the local communities to ensure that the local community's values are heard, or they're represented in our curriculum, particularly our health education. And any decisions that we make as a board, we make sure that our community's voices are heard in those decisions. If you'll recall, when we met last year, I did share that the majority of our membership is made up of parents and community members. I would like to point out that we've grown from in the last 2 years. Not reading all of our names, but I would like to acknowledge that Mamea Badu Achampong and Stacy Walker serve as our scribes, and Nancy Torres serves as our parent chair on the parent side. And then I've also listed our community members. I would just like to point out that all of our community members represent our local agencies such as Northwest Assistance Ministries, Texas Children's Hospital, Texas Children's Health Plan, Harris County Department of Ed, Harris County Department of Health. They have worked with us for a very long time. This year, we were able to add 2 pastors who have a passion for health, and those pastors are Reverend Hameen Carter and Pastor Victor Chapman. And so we increased our parent membership as well as our community membership. And in terms of district membership, because SHAC is primarily and heavily parent and community based, I serve as the district liaison, and Lori Carroll works very closely with me as well, as she again is our coordinator of PE and health. So I want to take us back a year and talk about all the things that we were able to accomplish. And you'll see we had quite a busy year this year, 21-22. We did review the district's recess policy to ensure that our students are participating in recess and physical activity now that we are back from COVID and we're back in in-person learning, and in having conversations with our administrators and working as a committee. We did again see that we do have a very healthy district recess policy, and it is being implemented with fidelity on our campuses. We also implemented House Bill 1525, and I'll talk about that in the next slide. As a SHAC, we participated in the health textbook adoption process. We created a SHAC guide for employees, an employee wellness guide. And then we reviewed our district's wellness policy in preparation for this year, as this is the year that it must be updated and adopted. And so we did start on the work last year. So in terms of how we implemented House Bill 1525. You'll recall that during the last legislative session, it was required that our shacks participate particularly in the adoption committee. So there were new processes and procedures that must be put in place for our shacks, and we must comply with our governing rules. And so the first one being, we were required to host 4 shack meetings, which we have done for years, and many years we have more than 4 meetings. All of our meetings must be posted. Our flyers and our advertisements, we were required to advertise within at least 72 hours prior to the meeting date, in which we did. We were also required, and all of these are new again, we were also required to have minutes to our meetings, and our meetings must be recorded, which they are. And we do post them along with our video recordings. And then new Shack was required to participate in the health textbook adoption. And after we participated, then as a Shack, we had to recommend our health textbooks we had to submit our recommendations to the board, which we also did during the adoption process in 21-22. And just as a reminder, I know I visited with you all a couple of times last year during this process, but just as a reminder, at the elementary level, we did select for health and PE, Quaver Ed, at the middle school level for PE Catch, and at the high school level, the Goodhart Wilcox book. And then for middle and high school health, again, we went with Goodhart Wilcox. And for middle and high school health, with a focus on human sexuality, Choosing the Best. And you see, you have before you and on the screens, the cover of each of those textbooks that, again, we reviewed in December when we were before you. So we did comply with all of the requirements for House Bill 1525. Another thing that we were really interested in last year, and for us, one thing that I can appreciate about our Shack committee is we really like to have deliverables at the end of the year. What does our work look like? And so while we do make sure we handle all of our required assignments set forth by the Texas Education Code, we like a deliverable. So I don't know if you remember, 2 years ago, we created a Shack parent guide where we took the 10 components of Shack and we gave best practices and tips and strategies on how you could really address as a family all of those areas: physical fitness, nutrition, health, wellness, things like that. So this year, we decided to focus on employee wellness. We know that coming, being in the middle of the pandemic and then on the other side of the pandemic, that took a toll on many of us. That took a heavy emotional toll on a lot of us. And so while we do focus primarily on our families and our students, we wanted to make sure we also address our employee wellness, because after all, our parents are employees too. And so we created a sister companion to the parent guide, and it is our employee wellness guide. And so just like we have the 10 components with the strategies and best practices for families, we did the same thing from the perspective of an employee, not necessarily an employee of Spring ISD, but an employee anywhere. What are those things that I can focus on as a member of my organization that will address my own wellness, my own health, so that I can be present in my job and so that I can help my organization boost productivity? And so that's how the guide was birthed. And I'll just give you one tip, just again, in mentioning the side-by-side companion guides for physical activity. In the parent guide, we talk about making sure you don't live such a sedentary life day to day. And so you want to get up and you want to move, whether it's doing household chores, gardening, maybe taking a walk around the neighborhood after dinner with your family. Those are the kinds of tips that we offered for our families. Well, from an employee perspective, how can we remain physical when we're at work? So some of those tips might include taking the stairs instead of the elevator, get moving. And I know we all want to park. We want that first parking spot, that second parking spot in the lot. Maybe park farther away as far as you can handle walking, and walk a little bit more. Get those steps in any kind of way you can. And I know we're all busy, but perhaps we can take a 2-minute mental break during the morning time, and then another 2-minute mental break in the afternoon, where we breathe, we practice mindfulness kinds of exercises right there at our desks. And even perhaps ditching the old school desk where you sit down and get a standing desk to help with your ergonomics. A healthy employee is a present employee, is a productive employee. And that's what we created with this wellness guide. I can't wait for you all to get your copies next Tuesday. You will have them. I think that you'll be really pleased with what our families were able to come up with in terms of our strategies and our tips. And so that was our deliverable for 21-22. And then moving forward into this year, I will say this is just a beginning. We will not have our first SHAC meeting until September 19th. And so I will meet with our parent co-chair and our 2 scribes prior to that to do a little bit of our pre-work, but our first formal meeting is not until September 19th. And at that time, we will create our entire plan for the year. But I know now that we will be updating our district's wellness policy. As I mentioned earlier, this is the year that it must be reviewed and updated. And then we will also review our child anti-victimization materials. And that is coming from Senate Bill 9, where our School Health Advisory Council shall educate our students on and make available to the community all curriculum materials used in the district's instruction relating to the prevention of child abuse, family violence, dating violence, and sex trafficking. So as you can imagine, with those topics that we'll be focusing on, our SHAC will work very closely with our Department of Guidance and Counseling and Mental Health to make sure that we identify the best possible resources available to us in our area, to make sure that our students get exactly what they need in terms of these areas. And that is who we are as a School Health Advisory Council. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share the work that we're doing with SHAC.
Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Carroll?
Yes, firstly, thank you to the SHAC for prioritizing wellness, especially when it comes to our teachers, our educators, our staff. When and how will the guides be distributed to employees, or have they already?
So no, they haven't been. We did spend this year working on that.
Right.
So we're distributing them in a couple of ways. The primary way, it is going to live on our website,
Right.
but just like at the beginning of this school year, when we have our first meeting with our family empowerment liaisons on every campus, they'll get their set of parent guides, and they'll also get a set of employee guides, because again, parents are employees too, and we want them to be able to implement some of these strategies in their own jobs. And then in terms of our staff, it will be on our website, and we will be communicating that through our internal communication systems, SISD Now, and all of our newsletters.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment. I am super, super excited to see that list of names grow, because SHAC was kind of my foray into where I'm at now. And I remember the struggles. The struggle was real just to get people to participate. So I got really excited when I saw the list of parents and community members. I'm so happy.
We're growing. We
Yes,
are.
yes, I see that. And it's very, very exciting.
Thank you.
But I did have a question about the recess policy. I've been waiting and waiting for this topic to come up for quite some time, and I've just been biding my time. But I'm glad to know that we've done a check and we're covering our bases. But and maybe this is more of a question for Dr. Hinojosa or some of the other chiefs here. how do we know that we are actually following all the criteria and the guidelines with fidelity? And I preface that only because I have personal experience in several years where recess wasn't happening. And then we wonder why our kids are just acting wild and can't focus and not learning what they're supposed to learn because they have all this pent up energy. And so I understand the pressure from the teachers on the other side because they have to teach. They've got to try to get as much as they can in the kids, but there has to be a healthy balance. So how do we make sure that that is actually happening?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And in our SHAC meetings, we do have some very interesting conversations about implementation. So mentioning Lori Carroll again, as she manages our PE department, she does provide professional development to all of our PE and health teachers. And so as part of her professional development, she does review with them all of the requirements, expectations, things like that. And so all of the teachers understand that it is an expectation. And even in preparing and making sure that we are adhering to the policy, I actually, along with Lori, kind of started doing spot checks. And I just want to share with what's happening at Winship Elementary School. We do, and I do believe that all of our campuses are implementing this with fidelity, but I'll just say at Winship, what they do make sure that the kids are getting outside and they're having their physical activity outside. But in the instances of perhaps inclement weather or something just precludes them from being outside, they pop in, and I'm gonna date myself here, something, I'll just call it like a Jane Fonda workout tape, where they do have video lessons where the teacher can put on the TV and the kids can literally stand right there at their desks and do their activities from the video.
Yeah.
And so that's just one example of how our elementary schools address it. And I will say it doesn't look the same at every single school because it's whatever that best fit is for that school. That's just one example in that we are ensuring that the kids are moving and getting that either 30 minutes a day or 135 minutes a week.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to piggyback on what Trustee Correa just said about how pleased I am at the growth in participation in the SHAC. Like, we really need people taking on those roles. So that's outstanding. I did want to ask for your feedback for the legislature about HB 1525. There, just a few weeks ago, Chairman Dutton's committee was reviewing and looking at the legislation from the previous years. And so if you were testifying before that committee, do you have any recommendations? What do you think works really well with the changes? What could be modified?
So House Bill 1525 or Senate Bill 9?
That's the one that impacted the SHAC. I'm worried when they pass. I'm worried when they pass that sort of some of the open meeting act type requirements might be onerous on a committee like that. It doesn't seem like it has, but
no, we haven't had any problems. So we kind of, we were in transition from virtual to face-to-face. And so to prepare the year before last, we actually purchased camcorders so that when we do have face-to-face meetings, we record them ourselves. And when we're in a virtual space, we record our Zoom meetings, and we have not had a problem with them. And even our 2 public meetings that we were required to have for the textbook adoption, because they were face-to-face, we video recorded them with no problem. I guess I kind of see it much like, except of course, not to the level of a board meeting, how right now we're recorded. And so I think and since moving to a virtual setting where people, if I can't come, do you have a recording? People had already been asking for something like that anyway. And so I think that it's worked for us.
okay. So you got nothing for Chairman Dutton. He doesn't leave it just the way it was, or no room for improvement?
I mean,
I have to say, and Ms. Carroll, we started early Like, we were following this bill all summer long, and Jeremy, who's not here with us today, we kept going into his office. And it was very stressful because it is, you know, the expectations of posting a notice, just like a board meeting, was something very new. But I have to say, Miss Carol, Miss Luna on her staff, Miss Bowman, we tracked this bill. We outlined a whole, when you talk about implementation plan, we had an implementation plan that was so tight, who was responsible for doing what piece of it. And for us in spring, because we were so proactive, when school started, we had our plan and we began the process immediately. So we were ready by December, having gone through and done all the pieces that were, I mean, because now it's part of the law. So because we did it so early, because they were so attentive to it and the committee jumped on it, we're okay. But I know it's been difficult for other districts. But because we were prepared, we've been doing, you know, recordings and allowing people to participate via Zoom. We had so many of our shack meetings via Zoom. We were good.
Yeah. And Trustee Correa, putting on your parent hat, you can, I think, remember some of those conversations we had a few years ago, just preparing ourselves for it. And to your point of us jumping on it early, when we hosted our first public meeting for the textbook adoption committee, we did have staff members from a neighboring district to come to our meeting because they wanted to see how we were doing it, because they were just thinking about it, and they didn't really know which way to go. They didn't know what to do. So they came to our first meeting to just sit in on ours.
We were good.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you.
Thank you, Ms. Farrell. Our next item tonight, I'd like to turn it over to Matt Parasol to review and discuss our memorandum of understanding.
Thank you, President Durant. My first item's on beginning on page 106. It is a memorandum of understanding with One Goal and the Spring Independent School District. This is a renewal of the program that we started last year. This is tied to our college and career readiness as we continue to find different partnerships, strategic partnerships, and ensure that we have equitable supports for our students in getting into college and having that path to their next step after high school. This program started last year involving our 3 comprehensive high schools, starting with our juniors, and there were a total of 74 students that were involved in that. It's a 2-year program, so they will those students will move up in while they're seniors, as we help transition them to universities and to get scholarships. So as we had a presentation similar to what the work One Goal does with that connection to the universities, is similar to Emerge. While Emerge, which is my next item, focuses on students who are our highest achieving students getting into selective universities, One Goal focuses on students who are would be first-time college enrollments in their family, and helps them get into universities. Many of these students may have averages that are in the B range. And so actually the average is about 83% is their grade point average. So that's a partnership between this program and the schools. A teacher provides direct instruction, one of our teachers utilizing the curriculum to help students make that connection.
Parasol, I was very interested in this, that it looked like it was Emerge for regular kids. And we've already had 1 year of experience with them. I'm not seeing how we're actually tracking the progress of the kids, and it looks like a lot of soft skills here. But I mean, when you have a family that nobody's ever gone to college, sometimes people just don't know how to apply. They don't just know some of the mechanics that are needed. And it looks like this is providing that. So it's like you got a navigator here for the kids. So how are you measuring that you're accomplishing what you want to measure or get?
So through a number of ways, as you mentioned, even things like walking them through FAFSA and how to complete those applications, how to complete college applications. That's all those elements are tracked through our college career counseling department. Additionally, the curriculum itself is housed in a online format through what's called Canvas. It's similar to what we use in Schoology. And so that is also tracked. We are able to track student engagement in the curriculum as they progress through. And actually our levels, like at Dekaney High School, was 80%, Spring High School was 76%, where all of One Goal, the average, it was actually only 62% engagement through the whole Houston area. So our students are showing high levels of engagement.
It looks like it's quite a deal, but only $200 a junior student. And when I saw the Emerge costs, of course, they're going on trips to different colleges around the country and that sort of thing. But it looks like it's a real deal. So if we're getting that kind of improvement in the engagement of the kids who could go to college.
Yes, we agree with the resources and support that they're getting. Additionally, our teachers are also getting support from One Goal, whether that be in person or through online virtual sessions, as in a form of coaching of how to help students go through the curriculum and make those next choices. With One Goal being college graduation for every student. That's their one goal. All right, if there's no other questions, I'll move to the next item. Yes, sir. So last year was 74 for our juniors. We'll be doubling that number this year. So 150 is our goal. So that way we will have those juniors that were seniors, they're getting year 2, and then we're starting with another cohort.
How are we identifying them and bringing awareness to students and their participation?
And that's the work that our college and career counselors are doing on those comprehensive campuses. One of the great things about the program, a lot of these type of opportunities historically have been done, like come to after school sessions, attend here and we'll show you how. This is actually built into their instructional day. They have an elective course and they're actually every day they're going through and getting the experiences and learning about that next step and researching universities and so forth.
But how do we determine which students participate?
And that's our college and career counselors are identifying
Counselors
those
are
students.
identifying them?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Utilizing the data, looking at for students who have not had, their families haven't had that opportunity, they're wanting to get into college and trying to recruit. We also have an additional partnership that we started a few years ago with TRIO, and that one's ETS. It's Executive Talent Search. It's from the federal government, and that also is another form that is recruiting students. And so we have those three areas. We have one group that is our high performing students, those students that maybe be in that B range, and then we have an additional support that's really trying to market students that may not even think, college isn't for me, and we're working through that program to help those students dream and know that college is in your, that opportunity is available to you. So
I just like to make sure that our process is equitable and that that there's awareness, because there could be students that are interested and parents that would want participation that aren't aware of it. I've talked to seniors, parents who said, you all don't offer any certifications when we offer hundreds of them. So it's where's the awareness of this opportunity?
I'm gonna echo that. I was a TRIO kid and I was a C student ETS kid. My parents did not have aspirations for me to attend college. The only way I got involved in that was a teacher recognized something for me. And so it shouldn't be as accidental as that, right? There shouldn't be that degree of luck involved in kids pursuing their potential. So I agree with President Durant. I want to see what kind of systems we have in place to make sure that this opportunity is equitably distributed.
And that we're not cherry picking, and that we're making our opportunity available to all students and setting criteria and standards on how we're selecting.
And you mentioned this is being presented in their elective classes.
In an elective course, they actually have a course tied for this specific purpose.
Which one?
I'm sorry,
They got a
for
course?
college, yeah, it is a college prep elective course.
Every junior and senior? Every
No,
junior?
just so for the 70, we have 75 spots. And so that's where our college career counselors are identifying for those students where that would fit into their schedules, to be able to, they create interest. So our counselors are meeting with all students, helping them identify that pathway, what's best for them, and identifying which of these programs may be the best support, in addition to what they're doing on campus as well to bring awareness to our students. And, we also have Naviance. So we have multiple layers that students are being exposed to opportunities, connecting to their job interests and, future career paths. So no student is left behind. Every single student is
I see a lot of
marketed to.
students left behind. From how you're explaining it, I see a lot of students left behind. You just said 75 or 74?
75.
There were 74
Is that-
last year that participated.
Program. And I would venture to think there was only that number because the other 200 and something didn't know about it. I hadn't heard about it. Or is this presented in a auditorium presentation to our students? We're not reaching all of our students equitably. I should say, if I'm using it correctly.
So,
Terminology.
so there is,
We're
our
not
college
reaching all of them.
our college and career counselors that's part of their role, is that they're making those connections
So
with our
they're
students.
selecting the students, these
They're-
75 students.
They're working with the students as trying to find out where is that best placement. So when I spoke of trios earlier, we actually reached 616 students through that program. And so as we're looking at each of those options, it's finding that best fit of where we can best serve the student, what's going to work. So we also, at the same time, depending on a student's schedule, they may not have an extra elective to be able to take that course.
Right.
And so we have other avenues to help make sure that they also have those same opportunities to be aware of the college and career readiness.
That's what I'm thinking of, those that don't have electives. That's why I say we're missing a lot there.
And one thing that I can make sure gets in our next board update, we actually have a big list of all these after school opportunities and Saturdays, different things that our college and career department is marketing and sharing with our students. So there's a lot of marketing that's happening on the campuses directly. And that's from posters to meeting with students and like assemblies, like you said, to the one-on-one conversations that happen. And so I'm more than happy to share that. And so you can see the different, we're hitting it from lots of different angles. And so we want to make sure that kids are aware. And, we continue to see high numbers with our CCMR numbers, with college career military readiness. And we're working to continue to grow that, because our goal is what the board has set for us. And as our portrait of a graduate, that every student is given the opportunity to chase their dreams.
I just had a comment. I was wondering if it's possible for us to get a recruitment plan and have that presented to us as a board.
Sure, we'll have that for you. And please note, this is just our second year with one goal. And so last year was our pilot year. And as Dr. Parasol said, we have a layered approach to serving our students. And, our next item you'll see, which is now in our 5th year, is our Emerge program, which is a very selective group. This program here, we are in our 2nd year with one goal. And so these students are identified by our college and career readiness counselors, someone like Dr. Lauderdale, Dr. Thompson, now Dr. Thompson, that you all know very well at Westfield. So they are identified. They do have to meet the criteria, and one of it being that they have space in their schedule. Then we have, as Dr. Parasol said, our TRIO program that is a partnership. We just secured this as a grant. I brought that to the board last fall semester, and that's a brand new grant for us, touching our middle school and high school students. And then of course, we also have our community based projects. And so we'll prepare not only all the offerings that we do have, but also because we've already identified for one goal, the recruitment for Emerge, the recruitment for One Goal, and the recruitment right now is ongoing for TRIO. But all of these happen in the spring semester. We identify the students based on the counselors and based on their student performance data. So we can definitely provide that. I know Ms. Walker's here, our assistant superintendent for high schools, and this is the project, she's got a lot of things she needs to support our high school principals with, and this is one of the projects. So we want to
Can
make
she
sure.
speak to it for us a little bit, please?
Ms. Walker, did you have, would you like to talk to One Goal?
Hello.
Grab your microphone, Ms. Walker. Just push the little, press the button there. At the bottom. It's Mike.
Okay, thank you. It's new for me. Hi, members of the board and Dr. Hinojosa. I'm here to answer any questions and then be of support. Yes, we are absolutely. I've actually messaged Dr. Hinojosa today. I spent about 3 hours with Mr. Resendez today at Spring High. Visited Winchie for about 3 hours today. In the morning, we'll be headed to Decaney, Westfield, and Momentum. And then Ms. Guidry, who is out, we are scheduled to meet on Monday after she meets with her staff. CCMR is at the top of our priority. And as you've heard, Dr. Paraso mentioned and Dr. Hinojosa mentioned, there are many layers to how we address all students. I absolutely agree with the recruitment plan so that our parents are aware of the many layers that go into effect. But one of the goals is definitely making sure there is an awareness for our students. That's the first step. We are an at-risk district, and I like to call our students at promise because they are promised for success, but that comes with an awareness. And I will say that prior to me getting here, I've seen a tremendous effort placed on CCMR in all of the categories. So where we were able to announce yesterday that we are at 72.9% as a district, and that is huge. That is 40% of student achievement in domain 1. And so that's going to play a huge part in what our students are able to do when they leave Spring ISD. And, I can speak to the work. Dr. Paraso is correct. Whereas we may not be there yet. I had a senior, and he has 2 certifications headed into college that several, and I don't want to get emotional about it, but several adults don't have. He's OSHA certified. He went through all of his modules. It was a press as a mama, it was a press to do that. But just to know that having those teachers, the CTE teachers pushing in to say, hey, Miss Walker, Director Walker, without this certification, we have to get it together. And so we've had some very close conversations. So the teachers, boots on the ground, they're very much in the work to make sure that all students are involved in the process and the many layers of those opportunities. We do have a gap, 100%. Dr. James said today at Winchie, he set that goal 100%. And everybody looked at him like, what do you mean? And he said, nothing else is acceptable. And so our principals do have some lofty goals. They see it now. They see how it impacts the things that they do, and they're excited about it. So I'm excited about it. Any questions?
Sort of. Well,
Okay.
so I appreciate what you said about the impact on the domain through CCMR. Because and I was looking through here and I see that the services are provided by partner educators. And I know that relative to the state, our ratio of counselors to students is better. But it's like this, I don't see how we touch every child over the course of a school year
Mhm,
with the ratio we have. And so that's some of that's a budgetary issue.
mhm.
But like I said, I was one of those kids that didn't have the kind of parental support that you can provide
Mhm.
for your children and I can
Mhm.
provide for my
Mhm.
children. I'm first generation college, and I see like those kids do not get targeted by Emerge
Mhm.
or by one goal. And there's a massive amount of potential there that I want to make sure we're making every effort to reach out to.
I absolutely agree. So I do appreciate that suggestion, where we all put together that plan to show each and every opportunity to see how many opportunities we have for our students and where the gaps are. I will tell you that Dr. Collins has put together a plan, for reviewing some of these processes, and I've received that plan, and that's part of the conversations we've had. And it's very detailed as to what our counselors are going to be doing through their process. So my role with the principals is that, okay, now we see the counselor's role, but what things have to happen before it gets there, or along the way. And so bridging that gap is where we are now. So there are multiple people that have to play a role in that, or else it's just an outcome. So I understand what you mean.
All right, well, thank you for coming up here last minute, and we appreciate it, and we'll look forward to that recruitment plan.
Absolutely, thank you.
Your next item, please.
Our next item is another renewal, and that is the memorandum of understanding between Emerge and Spring ISD. It starts on page 113 of your packet. Back in May, we did have Emerge come out and provide us an update regarding the partnership that has occurred over the last 5 years. And so moving into 2021-22, the school year, we had 150 students that were partnered with Emerge. And so that is huge growth from where we started with 65 students back in 2018-19.
Dr. Pariseau, one thing that strikes me about the Emerge program is it really has a multiplier effect. We keep hearing stories of how Emerge scholars reach out to their own siblings and their friends, and that what they are learning on test prep and that sort of thing, it really not just. Anyway, it's not just the Emerge scholars. It really is affecting the whole culture around them. So this is a phenomenal program.
So I've been doing professional development on finance. And one of the things that we're toying around with is per unit cost for different programs. This is an incredible bargain. So I plugged the per unit cost of Emerge into my thingamajig. And the range per student is $900 to $700 to $900 per child for this massive benefit that these kids get. I just think it's a really good value. And the more we can scale this up, the better.
Yeah, so these partnerships have been great, and that the grant funding that covers a large portion of the cost, leaving a very small matching part for the district.
You have another item?
All right, my last item is a memorandum of understanding between Texas A&M University and Spring ISD. This one is tied to another grant and opportunity through A&M and their education and cultural awareness division. It is called Project Excel, and that what Project Excel is designed is around culturally responsive behavioral management, professional development. It's really targeted around middle school, and the program itself was developed actually on our behalf, because of the work that Dr. Hinojosa did several years ago, as we looked at our middle schools and the data of what we were seeing with high levels of discipline infractions and behavior. I'm really looking at how do we help equip our teachers to have a strong set of skills to make sure they're creating classrooms that are equitable and culturally aware. And so this program was developed to provide an opportunity for online professional development. Teachers will be attending the sessions at their own pace. They then actually engage in these activities and strategies in the classroom, and they write reflections in the online courses to continue to grow. The teachers that will be participating this year, we've selected 3 schools in the pilot. Those schools are Wells Middle School, Dewitt Middle School, and Springwoods Village. As teachers participate this year, there are a number of surveys to see how that they're progressing and implementing the strategies and what they're seeing as the result of that in the classroom. Teachers will be provided a stipend of $250. This work is being led as part of our equity work by Dr. Marie Mendoza. And she'll be working directly with the campuses. It will include administrators as well as the coaches, so that there is, again, multiple layers of support that are happening as we implement and ensure that we are being culturally responsive.
Dr. Pariseau, is this a brand new program that they've never had Excel before? So we are really at the forefront here. And you said it was designed for us, okay? And I assume you're working with some people at Texas A&M who are very, have a deep background in this kind of program. There was not much description of the particulars of the program here, but I would be interested in more information about this later. Also, will there be classroom observations of the teachers to see if they're actually using these culturally responsive instructional techniques?
That will be the work that our administrators and our coaches are doing to observe and also to support the teachers as they implement them. It is a partnership with A&M that we've actually been working with these professors in the past. And so what the lead of this is Dr. Blake. She has worked with our teams before, and she is actually a psychologist. And so there's a large group of educational scientists who have worked together to develop the training program.
I just realized that whenever you're trying something new, at least it always took me 3 years to get something to work. You know, it just like you can learn and then you redo and so on. So I hope, everybody at these 3 schools realize that they really are at the forefront of creating something here. But it sounds wonderful. I just want to make sure that they are collecting the data that they need to actually see if this is working.
And that is a big part. There will be some focus groups as well that occur. The curriculum is front loaded to happen from September to December. So they'll complete all of the curriculum during that time. And then the rest will be that observation support. And then we'll be actually utilizing 2 other of our schools as control groups to identify the data and compare the results with the plan of an expansion as we celebrate the support that it's had for our teachers and our students.
Be very interested in seeing the whole experimental design then if you're going to have a control group. Okay.
Do we have any idea why we have these ending paragraphs right before the signatures were? Page 126. It says pursuant to the chapter 2270 Texas Government Code, it talks about boycotting Israel and not being a part of engaging in business in Iran and Sudan.
Yeah, you can thank the Texas legislature for that. It's required on all our contracts. Yeah.
And just for my own education, what is the difference between an MOU and an MOA? Because we have memorandum of understanding, and this particular one is actually an MOA, even though we've got an MOU in the notes.
Some of the so we have experienced that before. Some of the universities have an agreement instead of the understanding. And so I think it's just semantics. The contracts themselves or the agreements themselves look very similar.
It's a molecule. It's a monoamine, MOA.
Thank you, Dr. Pariseau. Our next item tonight, I'd like to recognize our Chief of Academics, Dr. Cuellar. Get it right? Yeah.
Thank you, President Durant. Board, we're going to be on 127 for the first of two in the academics. We are looking at an interlocal agreement between Spring ISD and the Harris County Department of Education. This specific interlocal agreement is really focusing on our talent development and I would say kind of like our Grow Your Own program. This interlocal agreement really outlines the partnership of us potentially engaging or us having paraprofessionals that are going to go down the road into becoming a Spring ISD teacher. Harris County Department of Ed, we will be selecting 15 paraprofessionals that will then be working through HCDE on getting certification. Our paras will be engaged in a 3-year program. In the first year, they will come in on paraprofessional salary, but on year 2 and year 3 will be on teacher salary. They will be going through a program that will consist of an internship, observation hours, professional development, and also on-site coaching. This program we're really excited about because we know in a very time as precious as now where there are teacher shortages all throughout the nation, really focusing on building our own pipeline of educators in-house is truly exciting as we continue to ramp up our efforts in doing that here. This work is being led by Tiffany Weston and also being supported by LaTracy. So we're really excited for this partnership to get going. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions. One is the students are going to be doing observations of other teachers in other classrooms. Are they going to have a observation instrument that they fill out so that they can actually collect data on the classroom they're looking at?
Yes, ma'am. I would imagine that's going to be a part of the program. One thing I also want to make note too is that we also have designated Wednesdays too for our paraprofessionals to engage in an all-day professional development at TeachUp. But then through the internship program, it is going to require observation hours and also feedback.
I don't know if you're structuring it this way, but I think it's usually helpful to have 2 or 3 teachers observe a class together and then discuss it later because one sees something that somebody else doesn't see and you get a richer conversation and analysis. Are you structuring it with multiple?
Dr. Jensen, I completely agree. And I think that even works well, that even works most effective, even how when we go into classrooms and we are providing observations and feedback, that inter-rater reliability is so important that we're all calibrated and we're looking at instruction from the same lens.
The other thing I was interested in is the test prep part of this project. And I know that there's always a general instructional type of thing on the Texas certification test, at least there used to be. And then there's a grade level or topic specific, subject specific tests. So if you have a real variety of people certifying in different areas, how are you meeting that challenge of helping them prepare for the different tests?
Yeah, the certification examination is always a very big part. Just speaking from personal experience and going through a very similar preparation program, actually, having an instructor actually take you through the different domains and components of the certification examination is actually part of the program, but also getting that real practical experience with, in partnership with the ISD, us, and being able to also help and provide that preparation as well.
Thank you, Dr. Clara.
Thank you. Okay, the second item, we are actually looking at an informational item. I wanted to bring awareness to the board on a little shift in our regional day school program for the deaf. What is before you is information about a shared service agreement that we are getting involved with Region 4 to help support our regional day school program for the deaf. Currently, right now, we are contracted or we do utilize the services from Aldine ISD. We have 42 students that are engaged in this program. 24 are full-time students that actually attend Aldine ISD because they do have the facilities and the services and the instructors to be able to provide this type of support. But one of the things too that was made aware to the school system is that Aldine ISD is actually experiencing limited resources and supports specifically for this program. So getting into this partnership with Region 4 is they will provide us with the necessary supports, placements, services, as well as the identification of certified professionals and teachers that can help provide that support to our students.
Any questions? Thank you, Dr. Cuellar.
Thank you.
Okay, for our next item, I'd like to recognize our Chief of Schools, Dr. Perez.
Thank you so much. I have one item. If you could please reference page 138. And so what we're going to be asking is for the board to review and approve this MOU with Good Reason Houston, Spring Independent School District, and Darrell Williams. And the purpose of this MOU is to increase the number of students in our high quality schools. This partnership with Darrell Williams is not a new partnership. We are actually in an extended partnership with Good Reason Houston through the School Action Fund and with Darrell Williams this past year with the ADSY and also with the System of Great Schools, right? So these are all grants that we've been able to acquire, and we've had a partnership with them. And so part of the work that we're going to be engaged in this year is for Darrell Williams, Good Reason Houston, and Spring ISD departments, academics, and school leadership, working with all of the iSchool zone schools. And the idea is that we will have Darrell Williams either model and coach and also engage in learning walks, and to also help us with the units of study. For those of you who are a bit unfamiliar with Darrell Williams, and Trustee McDaniel might be familiar with him. He's done a lot of work with Teach Like a Champion. And for those of you who this summer went to the Summer Leadership Institute, we actually had Doug Lemov come out and present to all the administrators. And so part of our work that we do with the Springway systems and routines comes from that framework, right? And so why do we want to not only continue to provide services, but also expand the services to Clark Elementary and to Clawton Middle School? Because we've had teacher efficacy, right? Teachers feel confident with the work that we've done. And also we've experienced student growth through this work this past school year. And finally, I wanted to let you know that what you're actually reviewing is and what you'll be approving is the MOU and the value of services that Good Reason Houston will be sponsoring equal roughly in the $148,000. So they're actually sponsoring all of these services, and all that Spring ISD will be receiving is the actual services and the partnership through all of us working together to ensure that we increase the number of quality seats in our schools.
Dr. Perez?
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed that Mr. Williams lives in New York, so he's going to be doing a lot of flying, I guess, back and forth. Also, it looks like he's going to prepare a film. Is this going to be of Spring ISD teachers teaching?
So if you reference page, yes, if you reference page 144, but if you go to page 152, it literally outlines all of the content goals. So the idea is for us to continue to create videos where we have model teachers doing at-bats where we can use that for PD purposes so that we can learn from each other and really expand our services and scale it out, right? Because once you can tell someone to do something, but once you see it, you're able to then replicate it. And that's part of our Springway systems and routines, which is to get our teachers, to get us to actually model and engage in a lesson so that everyone as part of the PLC can do that as well. Because there's an intellectual component to the preparation that we want people to do prior to getting in front of the students.
A lot of this work is in the PLCs.
Yes.
Okay. because
PLCs
When
and
I
learning
saw
walks.
this list on 144, it really sounded like what a good PLC is doing.
Yes, part of the work is, I think you mentioned getting in groups where you have several educators together, and it will include members of the academics team, folks from the Good Reason Houston. All this work will be led through Daryl Williams and our district administrator, specifically through Dr. Natasha Watson, right? And so the idea is that we'll be doing visits, and then we'll be looking at the curriculum Amplify, Eureka, and Carnegie so that we can really focus on and helping the teachers, right, build when should we ask the questions, right? When should we do a turn and talk? Because the curriculum gives us the lessons, right? But then how do we make that lesson come alive so that we can have the spark in our kids' minds and eyes so they can engage in the lesson?
Thank you very much for this. There's so many wonderful programs coming out here. I really feel that most teachers really want to be better, and they want the tools, they want the model of good teaching or different models to choose from. So I think that you're just really providing something that teachers need and want.
Thank you.
Thank you. For our next item, I'd like to recognize, turn my mic back on. I'd like to recognize Dr. Julie Hill. General Counsel.
She is an attorney.
Good evening, Madam President, trustees, and Dr. Hinojosa. I'd like to take you to the item entitled Order and Notice of Trustee Election for Positions 1, 2, and 3, found on page 157. And this is an annual notice that we do every year when we get ready to have our election for our trustee positions. And so on pages 158 and 160 is where you actually find the actual pages of the order. And basically, this is the document that is required for us to call for our trustee elections for position this year, 1, 2, and 3. Right behind it, you will find on page 161 the notice of our trustee election, which we publish to the community to let them know that we in fact are holding a trustee election, and it gives the actual date and those positions that are open. And then on the following pages from page 162 all the way to, let me see, I think it's 164, we'll list all of our particular schools that are part of polling places that will be used by Harris County for this upcoming election. And that's it on this item. I think someone else is picking up the next one.
Next item. Mr. Miranda.
Mr. Miranda will
Ms.
be taking.
Miranda. Mhm.
Yeah, I can handle the next one. It's on page 165. We've been asked by Aldine ISD. Apparently they're doing some renovations to their football stadium. And so we've been asked to assist. So this is an interlocal facility lease agreement with Aldine ISD for the use of Leonard George Stadium for this school year. And so Aldine ISD has requested the use of Leonard George to host varsity home football games while renovations are being performed on Aldine ISD Stadium. The facility lease agreement would be for the 2022, 23, and 24, that should be 24 football seasons.
Thank you for making that correction. I was really worried about
Yeah, we're not
it.
going all the way to 34. So just to give you kind of a heads up, we're only doing make ready work so that they can have the football games at George. We're being good neighbors in this sense, but they will be, Aldine ISD will be reimbursing Spring ISD for any costs associated with the make ready work that we have. It'll be minimal. It's not complete renovations or anything like that. It would just be make ready for the football games.
God bless them.
The recommended action is to authorize the superintendent of schools to negotiate the final terms and execute the agreement. Jeremy Binkley is currently working with their general counsel to finalize the interlocal lease agreement.
I understand
Should
they'll
be
have
done
their own
shortly.
staff, their own police officers.
They'll have their own staff, their own
Mhm.
police officers. I think Chief Colbreth and their team have already met on safety guidelines for the events that'll be there. And any staff that we use will be paid by us and then reimbursed by Aldine.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Miranda? Then we're gonna go back over to Dr. Hill.
Once again, I get a chance to do something I haven't done in several years now, so I get to take you through some policy. These are second readings, so it's not going to be long. So I'm going to read the titles and go through them pretty quickly, and I'll stop for questions. So if you would join me on page 172, we have a second reading of board policy CH local purchasing and acquisition. And the actual policy revisions themselves are found on pages 173 to 175. And if you recall from our last meeting, this one deals with allowing for emergency contracts when we need repair of facilities or school equipment at any time, regardless of the kind of emergency. Any questions? Fantastic. So if you would join me on page 176, we have the second reading of CV local facilities construction. And it is found on page 177, the policy is, and basically this entire policy is here to refer back to the one we just read, CH local and the emergency contract provision. Any questions? If you would join me on page 178, we're doing a look at the second reading of DEC local compensation and benefits, leaves and absences. And the actual policy is found on pages 179 through 191. This one is longer. It gives basic updates to everything, including different types of leaves. There's some descriptions on definitions. And so basically, there's some movement of things from one place to another in the policy, simplifying of language to make it easier to understand. But basically, the majority of it stays exactly the same. Any questions? Fantastic.
I have one.
Yes.
On page 183, where it talks about FMLA requests.
Yes, ma'am.
For employees' serious health condition, a serious health condition of employee spouse, parent, or child. I'm just wondering about, just thinking about different family structures and the inclusivity of that. For example, myself, I was raised by my grandparents. So if something was to happen to them, I would need to take FMLA, but they're not a spouse, parent, or child. So just thinking about the different structures of families that we have.
We actually, in practice, haven't had any difficulty working it out with our employees ourselves. Obviously, TASB hasn't found a need to be more updated in the language that they're using, but we in fact have not had any struggles with that.
So that would just be an individual.
Anything that has to do with leaves is always confidential and it's individual with the employee. And so we work those out in human resources with them.
Gotcha.
This is a local policy. Can we update it?
Absolutely.
Because there's a.
Dr. Jensen, okay, thank
The
you.
definition of how they updated the immediate family, that could be the language that we use. Thank you.
Okay, hold on, I'm making my little note too.
It was a really good catch.
All right. And we'll go through the whole policy. There may be more than one place where we need to update that language for the definition to apply. Okay. All right. Moving on, if you would join me on page 192. We have a second reading of CFD Local Accounting Activity Funds Management. And it's a single sheet on page 193. And our reference here is to change the language regarding student activity funds to really align with what it is that we actually do here in Spring ISD. And you will see that on page 193, toward the top in the box that's gray, wherever you see in the policy revisions where you see a gray box, a gray scale, that's where the district administration is making a recommendation for how we would change the policy to align to what we do. And that's what the recommended change is here. Any questions?
Who was the green strikeouts?
Whenever you have a green strikeout, it's because they've moved that language from one place to another.
Okay.
So if you join me on page 194, we have a second reading of CQB Local Technology Resources Cybersecurity. And this particular policy, which is on 195, empowers the superintendent of schools to actually have consequences for employees who fail to follow the training requirements for cybersecurity. Any questions? So if you would join me on page 196, we have a second reading of DFE Local Termination of Employment and Resignations. And the document can be found on page 198 and 199. And changes that you see in this particular item are to align to what our practices are here in Spring ISD in regards to resignations and rescissions of resignations. Any questions? If you would join me then on page 200, we have the second reading of DP Local Personnel Positions. And the actual policy itself is found on page 201. And this one specifically speaks to counselors, school counselors, and the percentage of time that they are to spend working on counseling duties, implementing the comprehensive school counseling program. Any questions?
Can I get a minute?
Sure.
While she's reading that, I did have a question back on page 190.
On 190?
190, yes. And it talks about an employee not returning back to work after exhausting all available paid and unpaid leave. It just says the district shall automatically pursue termination of an employee who has exhausted all available leave regardless of the reason for the absence. But it doesn't state any remedy in between the time, like it doesn't address the time between the time of the last day of paid or unpaid leave and then going straight into termination, unless I missed it somewhere.
So there's nothing outlined here in policy, and even though it says we automatically pursue termination, we have a process. So when an employee has exhausted leave and they haven't returned, we make multiple attempts to communicate with them. We call, we send email communications, we send written certified letters. In some cases, We've even, when it seems like we aren't hearing anything, we've even partnered with the police department and we've made a health safety visit to the employee's home to ensure that, you know, they're still with us. And so it's a gradual process. It does not happen automatically. And sometimes, depending on some of the communication that we can open up with the employee, they say, well, I need an opportunity to make an appointment with, you know, my medical personnel. And so we give them time to do that and get us documented. So we continue to work with them to see, you know, I'm not ready to come back yet. My doctor says I'm not. So we wait for them to get us the documentation. So while it says that it's automatically, I think the automatically pursue termination means that that's the next action that we take, but it's not a snap overnight. We ensure to try to have the employee rejoin the district if they want to continue working with us. And so sometimes we don't even get to discuss it with you guys until it might even be a month or two later, because we really try to work very hard with the employee to see if everybody can be restored and we can have a win-win.
And I know that that's something we try to do. That's why when I read that language, I thought, well, that's a little different from what we're doing in practice.
Yeah, look, so you could certainly allow yourself more wiggle room by changing shall to may,
If that's okay, can we?
I mean, I don't know if the governance committee wants to discuss this deeper. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So
All right,
it
so
looks-
on page 201, how are we gonna monitor and track our counselors? How are we gonna know that 80% of their time and duty is being spent with the CSCP guidelines?
I know we have Dr. Bettis here. If you'd like to address how we track how the Dr. Collins, number one, trains our counselors, and then the tracking system, if you'd like to speak to that.
Yes, thank you. So first and foremost, so like right now, we have a job and life day where we're gonna, Dr. Collins and her team they're gonna be working with all of the counselors, right? We also have different partnerships where we're actually meeting with the assistant superintendent, Dr. Olivo, campus principals, and Tracy Walker, which is the new high school assistant superintendent, to make sure that everybody is on the same page and that we're able to continue to follow all of the policies and procedures, right? That's to begin with starting the school year. Secondly, we have a timeline and different processes that part of our system and our process that we're going to be using now is we're going to be using the calendar to make sure that we have all these ongoing meetings to make sure that all of the people meet and that we're able to see any gaps and or address any areas that need to be addressed and or strengthen things that need to be strengthened along the way, along the year, so that the principals are aware and that the counselors are able to intervene along the way. But at the same time, as Dr. Collins, being the director of all counselors, is able to then provide guidance and direction along the way.
Okay, I don't know how that's going to ensure that they have the time they need to support our students. But
Is this TASB's language? This change?
It
Yes.
should be, right?
And you know that this change is part of a law that requires our counselors spend 80% of their time. And so this is part of, as Dr. Bettis said, part of the training. And our counselors do keep a log. So students come in, they sign in, counselors supposed to write exactly what they're talking about with the students. Is it a, crisis? Is it guidance? Is it career planning? So those logs are kept at every building by each counselor. And of course, we've got the lead counselor there. And then these logs are the way that they document, very similar like nurses document. This is the way that they document the time that they spend with each student or groups of students, because they may be doing group sessions, and then Dr. Collins and her team are able to follow up.
I have some concerns about unintended consequences. this is a thou shalt. So I worry that this is pressing on our people a state mandated compliance to something that I don't know where they got the 80% number from, right? But I mean, that sounds good, but I'm worried about the reality on our campuses and like what happens on our campuses. And this looks like this imposes some liability on us as a district if we are unable to comply. So I just,
And the reason I ask is I'm sitting here thinking, how are we gonna track and monitor this? Maybe the internal auditor can audit the logs or, whatever it is we need to do, but I don't even know how do we even ensure this is happening? And especially right now, we have students that need that support from our counselors. And like I said, I like the 80%. I just want to make sure that it's being monitored and that it's actually occurring. Trustee Adams does make a good point about the language.
I was just going to share, I was able to sit in a presentation by Dr. Collins, where is actually a presentation that she was going to be giving to her counselors. In there, she shared with us this SCUDA system. It stands for School Counselor Use of Time Analysis. And actually the counselors are tracking that, all of that time online. And we're actually able, she's able to monitor it and provide that data to ensure that that time is being spent according to the law.
Okay.
so
Mr. Adams, or Trustee Adams, I think you've got something here because what
Thou
bothers me is it says they shall spend 80%, not 81%,
well,
not
there's
82%.
there's a back out clause in the next paragraph, but I guess it's just the sort of thing, especially because it's new. We might want to take a look at that like a month or 2 months into the year to see how that tracking is going, to make sure that we don't get to the end of the year and realize we have a huge compliance problem that we'll be liable for.
Absolutely. I think you're correct. And I know Dr. Olivo is also here. He's our Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, works, directly with Dr. Collins. But you're absolutely right. That when this passed into law, we immediately knew we needed to do something different. And I think we've all spoken about, counselors sometimes having to do morning duty or lunch duty. So this is very clear. It is based on the ASCA model, the national model. So this is something that we've trained on. Now it's part of state statute. And so using that analysis, the SCUDA, we're able to track that and be able to supervise it and then be able to come to the schools and meet with the principal and the counselor. So it may be an elementary school that only has one counselor. And we notice, or Dr. Collins and Dr. Olivo are noticing that that counselor is not able to, meet that requirement. So you're absolutely right. We're not going to wait till the end of the year, but how is this monitored? And then what conversations can we have with the principals to find out why are we not meeting the time? Is it other assignments that are being done? Is it, me as a counselor, maybe I'm not able to manage my time, or maybe I need help figuring out my schedule that I can do small group and large group, and that all counts towards this time. So it is something that through the analysis that we're able to do, the close monitoring that we're able to do, that we can go back to the school, meet with the counselors, meet with their direct supervisor, whether it's the principal or assistant principal, and talk about why we're not meeting those deadlines. I mean, the time frame. Is it there's too many duties assigned to the counselor, or is it, help with time management, or is it help with planning your schedule so that you are able to meet those times?
Mm-hmm. I still go back to that. This should say she'll spend at least 80% of their time.
Correct.
There.
Because by saying thou shall,
Yeah,
you're saying they can't do 85% or
Yeah.
90%. The students may need 90% of their time.
And also, is this a daily thing, a weekly thing, a monthly thing? Because they may have whole days that they're doing counseling all day long and another day 50-50. So I don't know if we need to get that specific, but if you're going to be counting this up, you need a time period.
So this is local. We can make those changes.
I'm not sure, because this had gone through the governance committee and this is our second read. I'm not sure the discussion that happened before, but it can definitely go back. As we have noted with the DEC, we can also note this one and bring it back to our governance committee and we can go through it and make some decisions and then look at what the law says and look at, the wiggle room that we have.
My recommendation was gonna be two things. One, that we look back and track the language of SB 179, because it could be that the SB 179 actually says the shall and the 80%. And then the second piece that might be helpful, if we could possibly provide it in the board update, the components of the comprehensive school counseling program, so that you guys could see what those duties are that we're describing that the counselors are going to be doing during that 80% time.
Yes, and Dr. Hinojosa mentions, you said scooter?
SCUDA,
What is that?
that stands for student. I'm gonna make sure that I get it correctly, and I know Dr. Olivo is here. School counselor use time analysis.
It's an actual report. Actual report, we can run it weekly, daily, Claire.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes, that's a report that we can run, and what the plan was to run it weekly, meet with the assistant SUPs monthly, report out on how. But before we get to that, we're actually developing a plan to meet with the assistant SUPs and principals and look at all the counselor responsibilities to see they're not gonna be able to meet this 80% if you have them doing this kind of stuff. And so that's what we're doing up front, and we're hoping to get that done. Not hoping, we're planning to get that done by the end of next week, so that when the kids report, we've trimmed down what they're being asked to do on the campuses. But we can run any of those reports at any time to bring to the board for the school counselor use of time analysis. SCUDA.
All right, thank you. I learned something.
I did have one question on the backup page, page 198, where we talk about at the very bottom, withdrawal of resignation. It's adding consent of the board, the superintendent, the chief of human resources, and human capital accountability. What was the rationale for adding the multiple layers?
The reason for adding those layers are, this is the actual practice that we have here at Spring ISD. TASB writes for districts of multiple different sizes. We're a rather large district and we have a significant number of resignations that will come through. We have a nice number of recensions of resignations as well, where we are able to talk either the principal or the hiring manager of that department, or someone from human resources is able to talk to the employee and convince them to stay and not leave. And so when that happens, we very happily tell them that we're happy to rescind your resignation and welcome back. We're glad to have you again. So that's basically why it's there. With a district of our size, the superintendent would be quite overwhelmed if she was doing all the resignations and recensions. And so that's why in our practice here, I do those for her. Okay, let me catch up to where we were. So if there aren't any other questions right now, then let me take you to page 202. And we're looking at the second reading of EHAA local basic instructional program, required instruction at all levels. And what we're looking at is the changes on pages 203 and 204. And the language that's added is through HB 1525, and it speaks to the human sexuality curriculum provisions. Those are found on page 204. Okay, and if there are no questions, then please join me on page 205 for a second reading of EHBC local special programs, compensatory accelerated services. And this particular set of changes on page 206 gives us the codification of HB 4545, which you've heard us talk about with the required tutoring and accelerated instructional services that we provide to students. If there are no questions, if you would join me on page 207 for the second reading of EIE Local Academic Achievement, Retention and Promotion. And between pages 209 and 214 is where you find the revised policy. And basically, these are updated promotion and retention guidelines.
I have a question on page 210 for promotion. So for grades 1 through 5, it has promotion to the next grade level shall be based on overall average of 70 on a scale of 100 based on course level, grade level standards for language arts, math, science, social studies, and a grade of 70. So that's saying all subjects must be above 70% for promotion. Is that what that's saying?
Well, at least 70, not necessarily above. The grade of 70 or above. So you could be higher, but the minimum standard is 70.
For all subjects, so not just the core reading and math, all subjects. So if I'm passing, go ahead.
So it is, you're absolutely correct. It includes all 4 subjects. It's the math, the reading, the science, the social studies, and the language arts. All of those averaged together must be at least a 70 or higher.
Average together.
Yeah, overall average is 70.
Then it says 70 in language arts and mathematics.
That's correct.
The 2 core subjects, the reading and the math, has to be at least a 70. And then the others are an average of at least an average.
So you got a 69 in science and a 71 in social studies.
You're good to go. You're good. But if you failed math or you failed reading, you're not good to go.
Okay, got it.
You can go to a summer program bridge, summer bridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Can we go back on page 206?
Sure.
There was a bunch of language that was struck about parent participation. And we were just talking about parents being encouraged to participate in the planning of their educational services for their children. And so that kind of goes against what we were just discussing earlier. So what was the reason for taking that out in this instance?
That's some language that has been struck out, so I'm not really certain as to why it came out. I do know that they have rephrased just the language about the accelerated instruction. And so I think that's what this was referring to in particular. I would probably have to pull a policy around it to see if it's just referring to accelerated instruction, which I think it is, not necessarily to the remainder of parents being involved in their students' instructional program.
Because the promotion retention meetings are found in a different policy, I don't want to misspeak, EIA, I believe. And this one was changed to be specifically addressing House Bill 4545 that talks about the interventions that are needed for the students.
I wrote that down also, Trustee Correa. So I was wondering, who is made up? Who is the Accelerated Learning Committee made up of? Are parents included in that? And so that's
Yes.
why, okay. So maybe that's why it was struck out.
And this is, Dr. Hinojosa, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is actually the individualized meeting that happens with parents and students who may not be successful, to inform the parents of what the range of services are and what the expectation is, what we need the student to do to be successful, and as well as discussions with the parents on how they can help to make that happen. Okay. Thank you so much. If you could now join me, I'm going to move back forward to page 215 to the second reading of FDE local admissions, school safety transfers, and pages 216 and 217 are where you find the actual policy. And the change here is on page 216 with the additional 2 words that are added, or disabled individual student. So disabled individual. So they just included and expanded that definition to include that category of individuals as well. And that's the only change that they made here. Okay. If you could join me on page 218 for the second reading of FEA local attendance, compulsory attendance, and the change that's made here. The policy is on 219 and 220, but this change is to allow for a student to have an excused absence if they're going out to get their a learner's permit or their driver's license. And if there are no questions, you could join me on page 221 for the second reading of FEC local attendance for credit. And the changes here, policies are on page 222 to 225. And basically it's providing more details on how to address student absences when it's due to illness, as well as additional details on how to look at extenuating circumstances and to calculate that into attendance for credit. If there are no questions, could you join me on page 226? For this is a first reading of FFG local student welfare, child abuse and neglect. This particular one is the change is adding in the word reasonable in front of cause. Instead of the previous language was cause to believe, it will now read reasonable cause to believe.
I'm wondering, by adding that word, is there a definition of reasonable, or does that, their documentation, primary, secondary sources, anything like that? Or we just throwing in reasonable?
Well, no, the attorneys would not say we just threw in the word reasonable. The word reasonable is in for that that seems crazy, for that very reason. Because the difference turns on almost to the degree of protection, almost like immunity. So if you make another example would be that's similar. If I made a report to Children Protective Services because I had a reasonable belief that a student in my class was being neglected, it may be unfounded after there's an investigation, but I, at the time, had a reasonable belief that something was going on. Not just a belief, not just a cause to believe, but a reasonable cause to believe. So it gives you that protection. So it doesn't deter people from getting involved. It actually gives you I guess a shield in order for you to feel free to reach out and help a student or help an individual who may need help. Does that make sense?
I understand the purpose. I'm just wondering, what
What's reasonable
What's
to you is
the-
not
right.
necessarily reasonable to me.
Right,
Yeah.
so I just wondered if there was any meat to it. You know, what can we go back to say this was reasonable because of X, this was not reasonable because of Y? So,
Okay. I've gotten a little note that that was a mistake, that this is actually a second reading, so my apologies for that. It says first, but it's a second reading. But that doesn't change the question. It's still totally accurate. I know it's legalese, but it is. The reasonable piece is to provide that shield for the person that will be doing the reporting. If you could join me just a little bit more, almost done. You can join me on page 230 for the second reading of FL local student records. And the actual policy changes are on pages 231 to 235. This goes back to HB 4545. And prior to that, that group that got together to discuss a student's progress and when they may not have been successful in what we do about it was called a grade placement committee, but it's now called an accelerated learning committee. And so the language was changed in accordance with the new law. And you can see that on page 231 down toward the bottom, you'll see where a grade placement was struck out and an accelerated learning was placed there instead to comply with HB 4545. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Almost scared to ask for any more questions. I will say we are actually doing two updates, update 117 and 118 simultaneously. And typically we would not have this much at once. So any additional questions? All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. For our next item, I'd now like to recognize our Chief Financial Officer, Chief Ann Westbrooks.
I'll take the promotion. Thank you, President Durant, members of the board. The first item begins on page 236, and it is a request for proposal for architectural professional services. And this is related to what we're referring to as the Momentum Academy project. And if you all recall, that project is the renovation of the Clark Primary Elementary in preparation to become the Spring Leadership Academy, and then the changes needed to the TC Jester building in preparation to become Momentum Academy. And so we're referring to all of the needed changes to those buildings as the Momentum Academy project. And so what we have here is the request for the architectural services, which includes all the facility planning, the design, the construction, administration, and documentation, et cetera. And this is also the project that is approved by TEA to be funded using our ESSER 2 funds. And so what we did is we conducted a two-step process that will include, the first step is the request for qualifications and ensuring that all of the responses are, they're qualified to do the services and at the level that the district has required and is necessary. So within that first step, we do the initial qualifier. And then we have, if they meet the score of 80 or above, then we move to the next phase, which was an in-person interview where they were interviewed by a committee, and the committee was made up of the school principals. Dr. Banks from the Spring Leadership Academy, we had Dr. Parasol representing Momentum Academy, and then of course our construction team and our procurement team were a part of that. So that's the two-step of the first step, if that makes sense, or if we should say two phases of the first step, which is all related to qualifications. So we had 9 vendors that responded to the RFP. Of those 9, 5 moved forward to phase 2. And so we are requesting the board to approve the recommended architectural firm. and to also give the ability to the superintendent to move into the next step, which is the pricing, which includes the negotiation of the pricing and executing ultimately the contract that's a result of that.
Ms. Westbrook?
Yes, sir.
Served on the interview committee for phase 2.
Yes, sir. So that was the committee that included Dr. Banks, the principal at Spring Leadership Academy, Dr. Parasol representing the Momentum Academy. We had a member of our procurement services team, and then Gary Hutton and Mr. Miranda representing the construction
So
side.
it was the same team
Mhm.
as in phase 1?
Yes, sir.
I know at one time the board reviewed the instrument that's used, and we actually participated in the development of it and even in some interviews at one time. I know if y'all remember, we were all in a big room and we used the score sheets. Can we review that process again?
When you refer to the instrument that's used, do you mean the difference between the CM at risk versus competitive seal proposals? Is that the process?
Well, Mr. Miranda, he knows what I'm,
Oh,
if he
okay.
remembers that.
Yeah, sure. I think you're referring to the request for qualifications for the 2016 bond.
Mhm.
And we met, I think, at Westfield High School and everyone
Yes.
went through, right? Do
In
you
the
remember that?
teaching theater, I think
Yeah,
is
we
what it
can
was.
certainly, I think procurement has that instrument, but I'll remind, it has all of the objective criteria for step 1 and then the criteria to get them to step 2.
That was long time ago. How often do we review that?
That was a while back. That was at the beginning of the 2016 bond. One thing that I know Ann will remember here in just a second, these are paid, this particular project is paid for via ESSER funds.
Okay.
ESSER funds are federal funds, and it required us to have to do its own RFQ for the architect because of the ESSER funds. We thought that we may have been able to use the prior request for qualifications that we already have kind of in place, but we were not able to do that with the ESSER fund requirement.
We had to use theirs.
We had to go through a separate process with ESSER language involved in the process
Mhm.
in order to be able to hire.
Qualify.
Yeah, it was essentially the same process, but with the ESSER fund requirement being indicated within the process.
Thank you.
Were there any additional questions? No? If not, our next item is on page 230, or excuse me, 240. And it's a request for proposal for cafeteria kitchen equipment. And we had 8 vendors respond to that. And we're bringing forward a recommendation of 3 vendors that have successfully responded to the individual line items that you'll see that begin on page 243.
Is this for specific equipment or just vendors for equipment necessary going forward?
It is, if we look on page 243, there's some specific equipment that's listed there. For example, the door pass-through heated cabinets. And then there's a pass-through cooler. So there's some specific items and then they bid individually on those. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Westbrook, I
Yes.
know we've asked this question before. Can you refresh my memory about where these RFPs are placed? Like where do we advertise for that?
Yes, we advertise in the newspaper. So in the local, we're required to having it in a local newspaper, and it's also on our website through Contract Reporter. And we also advertise on the state website through the comptroller's office to make sure that we're casting the net as wide as possible.
So you said newspaper, as in a paper newspaper?
Mhm.
Does anybody even read in a paper newspaper anymore?
Our executive director of procurement actually went to Austin and spoke on that specific thing because we're still required to do it, even though, just like you mentioned, not very many people are actually reading the newspaper. And it's a pretty costly advertisement that's required. Okay, if there are no additional questions, then we can move to page 246, which is our monthly list of cooperative purchases that exceed $50,000. And the list looks a little lengthy for a couple of reasons. Number one, we did not have a meeting in July, so it has some items from July, but also because it's the start of the fiscal year and we begin to do our blanket purchase orders for some recurring items.
I have a question for the Amplify Education for the M class. Does that include bilingual resources for the M class lectura?
It does, yes. So that is an update for this year and it is included in that purchase.
Can you repeat your question?
Yes, so M class intervention kits teachers will receive. So I was wondering, does the equivalent for bilingual teachers, is that included, lectura?
The assessments included. The separate M-Class intervention platform is still under develop to connect directly to Lectura.
Okay.
So we still have the other resources that we will be utilizing for our bilingual students until that platform goes live. And they said it should be about 2 more years.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
I was wondering about the Blackboard Connect. I'm sure it's not the old school blackboards. What is that?
Yeah, Blackboard Connect, good evening, first of all. Blackboard Connect, it's basically just a system that we use to communicate with all of our constituents, whether it's, teachers, staff, and students, whenever there's something that needs to be communicated, either at the campus level or at the district-wide level. For example, if something happens at a campus, from small to big, we communicate it. If there is a delayed start to the day or if there is weather-related issues, then of course we use that service to communicate.
Thank you.
Is that integrated into our safety planning and it's all part of the same process?
Yes, ma'am. The video I showed you earlier, it will be integrated as we push the information out. It should be, we're going to work with communication to figure out how we embed it to make sure it's consistent, but that's part of that process. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, if no additional questions, then the last item is on page 249, and it's our very long list of,
Very long.
yes, very, very long list of taxpayer refunds. But again, it's basically 2 months in one. And we anticipate as our property values continue to grow, we tend to see more protests and more refunds as a result of that. So I think this may be more of our norm over the next few years. Madam President, that's my last item unless there are any additional questions.
Yes, I have an additional question. I
Yes.
always have an additional question. With the change in the property values here within our district, and, we're starting to see some of the abandoned strip centers and areas like that, how is that affecting us in the long term?
Well, overall, we end up losing that value. So our delinquent tax attorneys, the Purdue Brandon law firm, they go out, they do visits, they do follow-ups, they do judgments, or enforcements and all of that. But ultimately, if they're unable to pay, then it goes into a status of just being outstanding for a really long time. And you'll see that when Purdue comes and they do that presentation around February and we see the years, then they tend to just start adding up in those years that it's been 5 or 6 years and it's been on the roll for a while. But we lose that value. We lose that income.
So I know that the city of Houston has a program where they're taking down, blighted buildings. Is there anything like that for this area? Anything to consider possibly?
I haven't heard. I know at one point there was a revitalization going on. There was a group that was meeting to try and revitalize parts of 1960.
Greater
but I-
Greens Point.
Yes, but I have not heard anything as of late about their actions.
Good question.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for Ms. Westbrooks? Thank you, Ms. Westbrooks. So the board will now recess the open session and convene in a closed meeting in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.076. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of the discussion in the closed meeting will take place after the board reconvenes in an open session. And the time is now 9:08 p.m. We will now reconvene and resume the work session of the Board of Trustees, and the time is now 11:07 p.m. Do we have any motions?
Madam President, I move that the Board of Trustees authorize the superintendent of schools or designee to negotiate the purchase of a certain 1.72 acre property at Cornerstone Village 2, located at the northeast corner of the TC Jester Boulevard and Bammel, North Houston, pursuant to the terms discussed in closed session.
Second.
It's been moved by trustee Jensen and seconded by trustee Newhouse that the board authorize the superintendent of schools or designee to negotiate the purchase of a certain 1.72 acre property at Cornerstone Village 2, located at the northeast corner of TC Jester Boulevard and Bammel, North Houston, pursuant to the terms discussed in closed session. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. Are there any other motions?
Madam President, I move that the Board of Trustees find a public purpose exists in the payment of medical fees for student ER and authorize the superintendent of schools to make such payments pursuant to the terms discussed in closed session.
Second.
It's been moved by trustee Adams and seconded by trustee Correa that the Board of Trustees find a public purpose. Okay. And the payment of the medical fees for students ER and authorize the superintendent of schools to make such payment pursuant to the terms discussed in closed session. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That motion carries unanimously. Are there any other motions? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
That we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
It's been moved by trustee Hodges and seconded by trustee McDaniel that we adjourn tonight's meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carries unanimously. We are adjourned at 11:09 p.m.